October 8, 1985, marked the beginning of a string of brutal robberies that rocked South Florida. Two masked men used military weapons in a violent spree that threatened innocents. But no one knew who they were or where they would strike next. Before the FBI could stop them, lives would be lost, and law enforcement would be changed forever.
In Miami, a gang of robbers targeted banks and armored cars. They carried assault weapons and weren't afraid to use them. They struck during the day and sometimes twice a day. For a while, they seemed unstoppable. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. We knew that to stop these criminals would require stealth, ingenuity, and perhaps a little luck. No one expected to become one of the bloodiest chapters in FBI history.
Miami, Florida, 1985. To FBI agents, it seemed a city under siege. Each week, there were 3 to 5 bank robberies. Kidnappings, major drug deals, and shootings were everyday occurrences. But just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, a new breed of outlaws hit the streets and turned the Miami crime wave into a war. On October 8th, an armored car courier made a scheduled pickup at a steak and ale restaurant. The driver waited for his partner to return, unaware that 2 heavily armed men were also waiting nearby. As the guard approached the rear of the truck, the gunman advanced with military-style precision.
Hold it! Come out! I can't. Open the door! Open the door!
The driver refused to open his door. He drove away following company policy. The subjects retreated to a getaway car and attempted to camouflage their escape with a military-issue smoke grenade. The Metro-Dade County Police and the FBI responded to the scene. Robberies of armored cars and banks fall under FBI jurisdiction. The supervisor of the Miami FBI's Violent Crimes Unit was Special Agent Gordon McNeil.
There were basically no clues as far as who these individuals were. We had absolutely no idea, no way to go. No one had seen them without the black hoods over their faces. They wore gloves on both hands.
One piece of information witnesses did provide was the license number of the getaway car. Agents tracked the number and learned the car had been stolen a month before. But the lead was a dead end. The robbers had escaped with only $2,800. But their use of military weapons and commando tactics convinced Agent McNeil they would probably strike somewhere in Miami again. But where and when? The answer came just 8 days later. At a busy supermarket on South Dixie Highway, another armored car arrived to make a scheduled pickup. A courier returned to the truck with several money bags filled with cash and receipts. He never saw the car that came around the corner. escaped empty-handed. Metro-Dade police and the FBI quickly responded to the alarm.
6 Adam 31, 1097.
These men were clearly not afraid to use deadly force. The courier would later die from his injury. While he was taken to the hospital, agents interviewed his partner. As he described the gunmen, it quickly became obvious they were probably the same men responsible for the previous robbery at the Steak and Ale restaurant.
There was no money taken in that particular robbery, but there were a number of shots fired. So the ante was still going up here as far as I was concerned because of the continued use of violence by these two individuals.
Ballistics evidence would further confirm the connection between the two robberies. Investigators found double-aught buckshot from a 12-gauge shotgun, 45 caliber bullet casings, and 223 shell casings. The 223s seemed most significant.
And the identification division of the firearms unit of the FBI laboratory compared those two shell casings and said they were fired from the same weapon. So we definitely had a link now between the Winn-Dixie attempt and the Steak and Ale robbery.
Two violent robberies were linked to the same masked gunman, but there were no leads to their identities. Because they had not scored any cash at the Winn-Dixie robbery and so little at the Steak and Ale, investigators were certain they would soon strike again. 2 weeks later, on Friday, November 8th, a third robbery occurred. This time a bank job at the Florida National Bank. As a teller and a guard walked from the main building to the drive-thru, two masked gunmen emerged from a car. At gunpoint, they ordered the teller to open the door to the drive-thru.
Get it open now!
She tried to comply, but there was a problem with the key.
Hurry up!
Stalled in broad daylight at a busy intersection, the gunman aborted the robbery and fled with only the $10,000 the guard had been carrying. Within minutes, local authorities and the FBI Violent Crimes Unit responded to the scene of the crime. Just a few blocks away from the two previous robberies.
This pattern was starting to develop that all these crimes were happening in this same general area along U.S. Highway number 1.
FBI interviews with the bank employees confirmed that the robbers were the same pair who'd hit the armored cars. Maybe they figured a drive-through bank would be less heavily fortified than armored cars, easier sources of cash.
There was no higher priority in this case. We had to find these guys, and we had to get them off the street before they killed more innocent people.
But just an hour and a half later, they hit the Professional Savings Bank only 18 blocks away.
Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Get on over there! Get out of the ground! On the ground now! Get out now! Get out! Get out! You, come here! Come on over here! Come on, you! Come over here!
The robbers quickly took control of the lobby. At gunpoint, both customers and employees quickly followed their orders. With their masks and high-powered weapons, no one doubted they meant business. This time, they scored big. They raced off with over $41,000, delivered earlier that day by Wells Fargo. They escaped in yet another getaway car, a Chevy Monte Carlo. Witnesses had little to tell agents. The robbers had entered quickly and forced everyone down on the floor where they couldn't see what was going on.
Say to you exactly.
Get your hands up.
But since the men had actually been inside the bank this time, perhaps the security cameras had captured them on tape. Agents were soon disappointed to learn that the cameras had somehow malfunctioned and nothing had been recorded. It was the fourth robbery in 6 weeks. The heavily armed robbers were looting banks and armored cars in broad daylight.
The witnesses in these cases indicated that they felt that these people looked like true professionals. The way they walked, the way they talked, the way they carried the weapons. And I truly believed up until when we finally found out who they were, that we could very easily have been dealing with police officers here or very recent ex-military.
With such violent criminals on the loose, agents honed their own skills on the firing range. They worked the case relentlessly, exchanging whatever slim leads they had. But nothing panned out. 2 months went by without another robbery, and still there were no leads. On Friday, January 10th, 1986, William Roberts prepared to make a transaction at the Barnett Bank, just as an armored truck was unloading outside. He looked up from his checkbook and watched as 2 masked robbers shot the guard in the back. As the guard lay on the ground, one of the gunmen shot him twice more. This was the robbers' 5th heist in just 3 months, and another big hit. They fled with $54,000. William Roberts trailed the men for blocks. Though he maintained a safe distance, Roberts worried the thieves knew he was following them. Still, he stayed on their tail and noted their license tag and car model. He tracked them to a parking lot where they pulled in next to a white pickup truck. Roberts parked across the street and continued to watch them. He noted the make and model of the pickup truck, but could not see the tag number. After driving off, Roberts would flag down an officer and tell him the story. The FBI responded to the scene and interviewed bank employees. They found several .223 rounds, later determined to be fired from the same weapon used in the first 2 robberies. Nearby FBI agents examined the getaway car the robbers had left behind. But William Roberts was the star witness. Thanks to Roberts, the FBI had the first big break in a 3-month string of violent robberies. A check on the license tag of the getaway car revealed the car was registered to a man named Aureliano Brielle. Agents prepared to pay him a visit. Since the car had never been reported stolen, they suspected Brielle was involved in the crimes. They dressed for safety. In Miami, the FBI had been tracking 2 masked gunmen who had been robbing armored cars and banks, already killing 1 guard. Now agents had located the registered owner of one of the getaway cars. On January 14th, Special Agent Morellis and a partner arrived at the home of Aureliano Brielle, the registered owner of the car. A woman opened the door. Special Agent Morellis now works undercover and wears a hood to protect his identity.
She asked me if I was there about her son, and I said, yes, I was, as a matter of fact. She said, well, my son Emilio has been missing.
Mrs. Brielle's husband came to the door and they invited the agents to come into the house. Mr. Brielle explained that his son Emilio had disappeared 3 months ago with the family car, which he borrowed to go target shooting in the Everglades. The Brielles had filed a missing persons report, but heard nothing. They had hoped the agents brought news of their son. But both the Brielles and the agents would be disappointed. The FBI knew nothing of the young man's whereabouts. And as the interview progressed, Agent Morellis grew certain the Brielles knew nothing of the robberies.
The conclusion at the end of the day was that the Brielle family was not involved. They were victims. Their car had been stolen and their son was missing.
The Metro-Dade Police Department processed the Brielle's car with FBI agents observing. But evidence technicians found no fingerprints or anything else to advance the case. The next 2 months were quiet again, though the robbers remained on the loose. Agents worked other cases as they continued to mine every possible resource for clues. Then on March 14th, Special Agent Ben Grogan told a skeptical Agent Morellis about a newspaper article he believed was related to the case.
I guarantee it. That car right
The article reported the attempted murder of a man named Jose Collazo 2 days earlier. 2 men had shot Collazo multiple times. Then they had stolen his gun and his car, a black 1982 Chevy Monte Carlo.
Guarantee I'm right.
Grogan swore that the vehicle would be the bank robber's next getaway car. While it seemed to some agents nothing more than a hunch, they respected Grogan.
Car and disappeared. Shot him 4 times with the arm, through the face.
At 53, he was a career agent with 25 years on the job, including time as a SWAT team leader.
Is he still alive? Yeah, he got up, walked 1.5 miles to a convenience store, made a phone
His colleagues
call.
called him the doctor because he could do jobs no one else could do.
What do you think? Check on these plates.
So they took a chance on his hunch.
Get on it. Good job.
Mr. Collazo, tell me what happened. These 2 guys.
Grogan and another agent visited Collazo in the hospital.
They were 2 white males. 2 white males.
Collazo was in rough shape, with wounds to the side of his head, his arm, and his back. But he managed to tell the story of his nightmarish afternoon in the Everglades. Collazo had gone to a recreational trail near a lake, where gun owners often practice target shooting. He was firing his .22 when 2 men drove up beside him.
How you doing?
The driver pulled a gun on Collazo,
Hold up. Shut up.
who somehow had the presence of mind to identify it as a steel blue Magnum revolver.
Shut up.
He pegged the other man's rifle as a Ruger Mini 14.
Shut up. Shut up. Give him the gun. Give him the gun.
When the assailants demanded Collazo's guns,
Now
car,
give him
and
your
wallet,
billfold.
he complied.
Now back on up. Back up. Give you everything. Back up. Shut up.
But they shot him several times anyway,
Back up.
at close range. Then they left, taking Collazo's Monte Carlo and their own F-150 pickup truck. As they drove off, they believed Collazo was dead. He was just waiting until the shooters were gone. Then he would rally what little strength he had to survive.
Collazo had to make a decision as to whether he would try to live or just lay down and die. And Collazo said he chose to try to live. So he picked himself up out of that lake and walked almost a mile after being shot 3 times to seek help.
Finding Collazo was the best break in the case so far. He provided the single clue no witness until now could offer: a description of the suspects' faces. They had not worn masks when they assaulted him. Using Collazo's description, a Dade County police artist drew composite sketches of his assailants. The drawings would be made into posters with information about the suspects and their crimes, plus the warning that both men were heavily armed and extremely dangerous. Retired Special Agent John Hanlon, a 22-year FBI veteran then assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit, remembers what Collazo said.
Collazo was able to give a description of the guys. He told us about the white pickup truck. He was shot in the same general area as we thought Emilio Brielle had disappeared.
In the coming days, agents stepped up their efforts. They conducted a grid search of the streets crossing South Dixie Highway in the vicinity of the bank robberies.
I got the agents together. After I told them what I had on my mind, they looked at me like I was crazy. But I said, I want you to go down between 88th Street on South Dixie Highway and 185th Street and come up with any license numbers on white Ford F-150 pickup trucks. Something just told me in my gut that perhaps, who knows, we're trying to make our own luck. What is it, 1 million to 1, 10 million to 1? I don't know. But they came back with the license numbers of 10 white Ford F-150 pickup trucks.
Computerized checks of the license numbers would reveal the owners' names. Agents would then request driver's license photos from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Perhaps if Collazo saw the photos, he could identify the truck's owner. But in 1986, technology was slow, and before the photos came back from the DMV, the robbers struck again. On Wednesday, March 19th, just 1 week after Collazo's assault.
Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Turn around! Get out! Get out! Get down! On the floor! Both of them! Come on out! Get out!
The thieves hit another bank on South Dixie Highway.
Back up! Get out! Come on! Get out! Give me the bag!
It was their 6th hit in 5 months.
Give me the money! Get out! Put your face down! Be quiet!
One kept the terrified customers at bay. The other looted money from a teller.
Stand, everybody! Go, move! Don't look up!
The men escaped with over $8,000 in cash. As customers and employees recovered from the assault, an off-duty customs official who had seen the robbers flee called police. He'd noted the make of the getaway car, a black Chevy Monte Carlo, and the tag number, NTJ-891. Just as Agent Grogan had predicted, it was Jose Collazo's car.
They didn't even change the tag. And we're not really sure whether they were, well, we're pretty sure they weren't that stupid, but we speculate that in their minds, you know, they were these hard men. And we think that they were probably just saying, hey, in your face, police, you know, come and get us if you can.
Investigators learned little of value from witnesses. At this bank, the security cameras had filmed the entire robbery. But the videotape was of little use. The camera's lenses had captured little more than unidentifiable masked bandits. There was little doubt these robbers planned each hit carefully.
It appeared to me that they were doing surveillance of the banks prior to some of the robberies, because on most occasions they robbed the bank within 10 minutes of delivery of a cash shipment by an armored car company. So they were waiting until the cash was inside from the armored car company and then hit the bank.
On April 10th, Gordon McNeil and Ben Grogan discussed the case at firearms practice, sifting for any clues they may have overlooked. It had been about 3 weeks since the last robbery. There were no clues to the thieves' identities, but McNeil detected a pattern.
You're always looking in law enforcement for patterns of crime, things that seem to happen on a consistent basis. And the only thing that we had gone in these cases was this significant pattern that developed, always on Friday between 9 and 12, hitting the same banks multiple times, always in the same 40 square block area, always along South Dixie Highway.
Agents planned a surveillance for the next day. They would fan out to patrol the area where the robbers had struck so often.
Hey guys, you got a minute?
Yeah.
Unit Supervisor Gordon McNeil personally led the operation.
Everybody will leave from that location.
So we just couldn't wait for them to rob another bank. We had to get out there and we had to make our own luck, and maybe we could find them.
Start watching for the vehicle. You come across
Agent Hanlon remembers what happened next.
put it into play, hopefully it'll work out.
Eddie Morales walked over and said, "Hey, let's go down there." And I thought, well, what the heck, you know? So as a whim, I mean, there was no pressure to go or anything of that kind. I mean, I certainly had enough to do, and I liked Eddie, and I figured, well, we'll go on down there, we'll ride down, and rather cavalierly, and spend some good times with Ed, and we'll take it from there.
Many believed it was a long shot, but 14 Miami FBI agents met in a parking lot at 8:45 a.m. on Friday, April 11th, 1986. They would surveil a 53-block grid along South Dixie Highway, where 2 commando-style gunmen had pulled off 3 bank robberies and 3 armored car heists in 6 months. The suspects were described as white men, of medium build, one with a handlebar mustache, both about 30 years old. They were heavily armed and extremely dangerous. They might be driving a black Monte Carlo, license number NTJ 891. After a robbery spree that had lasted 6 months, Miami FBI agents went on the offensive in search of 2 killers, possibly driving a black Monte Carlo. They met to patrol an area where the 2 armed robbers had used military tactics to hit armored cars and banks. All would be stationed along the major thoroughfare of South Dixie Highway. Agents Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove were on their way to stake out the Barnett Bank when the impossible happened. A car that fit the description of the suspect's vehicle pulled directly in front of them. In disbelief, Agent Grogan advised all units of what he saw.
Attention all units, we're behind.
Gordon McNeil remembers the call.
Grogan was not an emotional person. Nothing could get Grogan excited. And I still remember his voice. He said, "We are behind a black Chevrolet Monte Carlo, Dade, Florida tag, NTJ 891. He said, "That's the tag, isn't it, Gordo?" I mean, he was just incredulous.
Agents Morales and Hanlon were stationed at the Professional Savings Bank when they heard Grogan's call. They began to search for their colleagues. Hanlon was driving, with Morellis working the radio. Hanlon tried to get a gauge on Grogan and Dove's location.
And I remember saying to Eddie, call Ben, tell him to start calling the cross streets so we'll know how close we're getting. Before Eddie had a chance to go on the air, Ben starts calling off the cross streets, and we're hitting those cross streets, one after another, so we were real close to them.
After proceeding south for several blocks, Hanlon and Morellis closed in behind them. The robbers soon suspected they were being followed. Whether they knew their pursuers were FBI or not, the suspects wanted to lose them. They took a right turn on 117th Street into a residential neighborhood, quiet at this time of day.
Still following?
Still behind us. They're coming.
They turned right again, trying to lose the tail. But the agents hung on, playing for time, as Agent Morellis recalls.
We were just trying to wait for as many FBI units to get to the location as possible. And we were also basically responding to what the subjects did. They weren't in any hurry. When they turned onto 120th Street, they actually slowed down.
The caravan continued on, with the agents always concerned about endangering innocent bystanders. Then the suspects made a left onto 82nd. It appeared they were heading back to the busy highway, where civilians would be at risk should a confrontation turn violent. When Grogan saw the silhouette of a long-barreled rifle through the rear window of the subject's vehicle, he knew it was time to act.
Somebody car stop, let's do it.
It was clear the suspects were preparing to do battle. Grogan put the light on his car and ordered a felony stop. Grogan pulled alongside the suspect's car and ordered them to stop. The suspects ignored the order, and Grogan pulled ahead of them, blocking their escape. Hanlon and Morellis moved up, boxing them in. The sight made an indelible impression on veteran agent John Hanlon.
And I'll never forget the man's face. I could pick him out today. He looked like your basic Western bad man. He looked very, very determined.
It seemed the suspects were as desperate to prevail as the agents who pursued them. Two heavily armed fugitives had ignored FBI orders to stop their vehicle. Special agents now tried to force them to comply. The last to catch up to the group was Agent Richard Manauzi. As he pulled behind the suspect's car, he saw one of the gunmen take aim at Morellis and Hanlon. Manauzi rammed the fugitive's car from behind.
They swung into a U-turn, and then Manauzi was able to hit him again and knocked him over into this parking area up against some cars over there.
passenger opened fire with a Mini-14 assault rifle. Outgunned, Agent Manauzi crawled to cover. Agent McNeil arrived seconds later, firing at point-blank range. They were surrounded by FBI. Their vehicle could not move, but they had superior firepower. And they refused to surrender. The driver fired a shotgun blast at Grogan. McNeil hit the driver in the neck. But the semi-automatic kept pumping out the rounds until one finally caught McNeil in the hand. Morellis and Hanlon advanced to cover him. Hanlon's .38 held 5 rounds. The Mini-14 had 30 rounds in each clip. And one of them shot down Agent Morellis.
It was all one continuous recollection. It was like 1 second I'm looking at Gordon McNeil's back, trying to maneuver to his left, and the next second is blue sky. And I looked at my left arm, and my left arm was completely shattered. It was like roadkill.
His partner was down, but the shooter kept on firing. But when he tried to escape out the window, Jerry Dove hit him in the chest with his 9mm. But to Dove's horror, the man shot McNeil in the neck.
I couldn't move my upper body, I couldn't move my arm, and I couldn't move my legs, so I assumed that I was totally paralyzed at that particular point. I couldn't move.
2 more FBI agents arrived and joined the gunfight. By now, the shooter had been hit 4 times, but he continued to advance and fire.
He just made up his mind that he was going down, he was going out, and he was going to take as many of us with him as he possibly could.
The agents knew they were outgunned, firing 6 shooters against the suspect's 30-round semi-automatic assault weapons. Dove and Grogan were forced to retreat behind their car to reload. Hanlon, too, reloaded. But the shooter kept on coming.
And one went right through my knuckles on my right hand and through the knuckle in my thumb. A bunch of lead and whatever went into the back of my arm, and I remember my gun flying. I said, "Ben, I've been hit."
As Hanlon tried to retreat under the bumper, the gunman shot him in the groin.
The blood geysered from my groin to my knee. I mean, the blood just came out like a balloon breaking.
Grogan was hit. And then Dove. Before they could reload their weapons.
I remember Ben saying, "Oh my God," and he fell at my feet. And at some point along in here, I heard the breath go out of him. He went, "Ah."
The subject made his way to Agent Dove's car. With his left arm nearly blown off, Agent Morellis managed to pull himself up. The shooter was trying to flee, and Morales had to stop him. Mortally wounded, the second suspect somehow dragged himself out of his car and joined his partner. If the car started, Morales knew they could only go in reverse and back over the fallen agents.
Eventually, I just got angry because I knew internally that I was dying, and my one last thought was, hey, if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna take these guys with me. I'm gonna make sure that they're dead.
With his shotgun empty, Morales changed to his revolver and staggered forward, firing at the subjects. Morales' shots lodged in the men's spines, killing them both. It was a violent end to the lives of two violent men. Just a few minutes after it began, the bloodiest firefight in FBI history ended in tragedy. 2 agents were dead and 5 wounded. 2 suspects still unidentified had also been killed.
Over here! Hurry up! Hey, let's have a killing me, man!
3314. Agent Jerry Dove lay dead. At the age of 30, he'd earned a law degree and fulfilled his boyhood dream of joining the FBI. He wanted to make a difference and had given his life trying. His partner, Ben Grogan, had also perished in the firefight. He had been just 1 year away from retirement when his wife could finally have stopped worrying about her husband's dangerous career. Crime scene technicians arrived at the site. Metro-Dade County Homicide Bureau Sergeant David Rivers was also there. Rivers had the Herculean task of reconstructing 5 minutes of living terror. That would take weeks.
Well, we have to find out what happened. And you do that in various ways. You obviously speak to the agents that were involved, and they can tell you what each one of them did individually. And then part of that is to take those different statements as to what they did individually and match it up with the physical evidence. The wounds on the body, the bullet holes in the cars, where the guns are located, where the cars are located, and to reconstruct it to make sure everything's exactly interpreted properly.
Technicians recovered 143 bullets fired from the fugitives' weapons. Questions that had plagued agents for so long were finally being answered. The Ruger Mini 14 rifle used to kill agents Grogan and Dove would match the .223 bullets found at some of the armored car and bank robbery scenes. In fact, the FBI crime lab could now forensically link the killers with several of the earlier heists. And from fingerprints, the agents soon identified the subjects as 32-year-old Michael Lee Platt and 34-year-old William Russell Maddox. But one question remained. What kind of men had wreaked this destruction, and why? Agents could not have been more surprised by what they learned from the killer's friends and neighbors. Instead of outlaws living on the edge, prepared for the ultimate confrontation, Platt and Maddox were known as quiet, family men. Photos showed their families relaxing together. Platt had a wife and 3 children. Maddox was a single dad. They were partners in a landscaping business. But further investigation gave up the lie of their double life. Inside a shed, agents found guns and ammunition, including the .22 Maddox and Platt had stolen from Jose Collazo when they tried to kill him in the Everglades. Agents would also uncover evidence of a bizarre murder pact in which the men may have killed each other's previous wives. No one had been charged in the two cases, but now they would be reopened. Within days, agents would confirm that Maddox and Platt had killed 25-year-old Emilio Brielle in the Everglades. A hiker found Brielle's skeletal remains in the Everglades, not far from where Collazo had been assaulted. Then another tragic footnote surfaced.
Thanks a lot. Hey, how did that interview go for you earlier today?
Special Agent Steve Warner received a package from the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles. In it was a copy of William Russell Maddox's driver's license. He was the owner of one of the white Ford F-150 pickup trucks agents had located a few weeks before. But there had been a delay in sending the licenses.
If they had arrived April 11th or prior to that, Collazo would have been able to positively identify Maddox, and we probably would have been able to arrest Maddox and also Platt, and 2 FBI agents wouldn't have been killed. But that's not the way the luck worked out in this particular case.
The FBI investigation revealed that both of the killers had served in the military. Platt had been a ranger, a member of the Army's elite First Strike Force, which explained the pair's commando tactics, fundamentally different than training received by law enforcement.
We don't have an acceptable body count in civilian law enforcement. We're taught one way, and that's defensive type shooting. You take cover, you do not take casualties. And then you look at the way Platt reacted that day. He reacted in a military fashion. He had the heavier weapon. He had the Mini 14 with a 30-round capacity. His back was basically against the wall. He had no place to go, so he advanced forward on our position, laying down suppression fire, and ambushed Grogan and Dove, who were behind the car.
As agents finally put the pieces together, a frightening portrait emerged of 2 formidable adversaries.
At the end of the shooting, Platt had 11 hits, Maddox had 6 hits. Platt was literally shot to pieces, and he kept fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting until he ran out of breath. He fought to the last.
They were going to die, it's just they weren't dying fast enough. And they weren't prepared to lay down and die. You know? They weren't about to give up.
Out of this tragedy came some positive changes that have improved the safety of all in the law enforcement community. Agents and officers now carry more powerful weapons, and their training better prepares them for violent confrontations like the one on April 11th, 1986. As hundreds mourn the deaths of 2 dedicated and selfless FBI agents, those in law enforcement have looked for meaning in the tragic events of that April morning. Over the years, Gordon McNeil has found some resolution.
The story's not Platt and Maddox. It's not important who they were. It's important to recall the courage that was shown by the agents that day, and the FBI. They did their job.
Mr. Robbery, everybody's down! Go ahead up!
In the 1990s, Seattle, Washington was plagued by hundreds of bank robberies. Most of the thieves were caught, but one continued to elude the FBI. Wearing a disguise, he stole millions, threatening to kill anyone who got in his way. With no leads and little evidence, agents feared the only way to stop him was to catch him in the act.
Every bank teller's worst fear is to stare down the barrel of a robber's gun. Banks use a variety of devices to discourage would-be robbers. Security cameras, silent alarms, and exploding die packs. But when an elusive bank robber targeted Seattle's banks, none of these precautions were effective. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It would take cunning, precision, and patience to capture a master of disguise the FBI knew only as Hollywood.
Seattle, Washington, 1992. The computer revolution was growing. Technology entrepreneurs were pumping billions into the city's economy. To accommodate the newfound wealth, banks opened branches all over Seattle. But neighborhood convenience also meant more opportunity for theft. On the afternoon of June 25th, at Seafirst Bank's Madison branch,
This is a robbery!
2 masked gunmen threatened to shoot anyone who did not comply with their demands.
Anybody, man? We're gonna shoot!
One trained his gun on the frightened customers, while the other forced a teller to empty her cash drawer.
Stay down! Go back!
After the bag was filled, they demanded car keys from one of the customers who they had watched pull up. They warned the tellers not to hit an alarm or they would return and kill someone. The two sped away with nearly $20,000. Since the bank's deposits were insured by the federal government, the FBI was called in to assist the Seattle police.
One in front and one in the back.
Because no alarm had been tripped, the bank's security cameras were not activated. Investigators had no photos of the suspects. Customers and bank employees described the gunman as being of medium height and build. One employee heard the man holding the cash call to his partner using the name Mark.
The guy came to that door.
The robbers had worn gloves, so no fingerprints could be obtained. Investigators attempted to lift shoe prints from a desk where one of them had stood. Partial treads were recovered, which investigators believed were made by sneakers. Agents recorded the license plate number of the customer's stolen car, a Cadillac sedan. Hours later, the stolen Cadillac was discovered abandoned in a neighborhood close to the bank. Forensic technicians would pore over the vehicle's interior, but find no fingerprints, hairs, or fibers foreign to the car. 7 weeks passed with no leads. Then, on Friday, August 14th,
This is a robbery! Everybody
the same
down,
bank was
down.
robbed again.
Jump!
Though the thief struck alone wearing a new disguise, one of the tellers believed it was the same man. He appeared to be wearing theatrical makeup.
We didn't trip off any alarms. Fill that up.
His take was more than $8,000, and it was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, the same man hit 4 more Seattle area banks. Each time, a solo gunman wearing theater makeup, a hat, and dark sunglasses was responsible. He brandished a Glock 9mm pistol and threatened to kill anyone who tried to stop him. On his 6th robbery, the thief had gotten away with $252,000, and investigators still had no leads and no name. Special Agent Sean Johnson of the FBI's Seattle field office began tracking this master of disguise, who had come to be known as Hollywood.
It's much easier to coin a name for somebody than call them tall white male in a blue hat. So with this person in particular, he wore, once again, this elaborate facial disguise, makeup. So somewhere along the line, somebody started calling him Hollywood because of that, and that name stuck with him.
Hollywood had gone silent since he'd robbed Seafirst Bank's Hawthorne branch in northeast Seattle. His take from that location exceeded $250,000. To date, Hollywood had grabbed over $320,000 from Seattle area banks. Authorities had recovered none of the stolen cash, and they still had no clues to his identity. As the months passed, investigators wondered if he had quit or moved on to another city. Then, on November 24th, 1993, just over a year since his last heist, Hollywood struck again. Brandishing his trademark Glock pistol, Hollywood herded the customers together.
Don't move. Money on the counter.
He returned to Seafirst Bank's Hawthorne branch, the bank he had previously hit for more than $250,000. He asked for the reserve cash. Unsatisfied with the cash drawer take, he ordered a teller to let him into the vault in a back room. Hollywood emerged with nearly $100,000. Again, he threatened to kill anyone who hit an alarm. No one disobeyed his orders.
When Hollywood came into the banks, he was very much in control. He was polite to a degree, but it didn't make people comfortable. They were very afraid that he would use the weapon. He brandished it. It actually pointed at a number of people during the course of the robberies. So we knew that he was not afraid to show the weapon and also to possibly use that weapon against somebody who didn't obey what he told them to do.
Security strategies in Seattle banks at this time included using marked bills to trace stolen money. Another tactic was dye packs. Hidden inside a stack of bills, the packs contain red dye and an electronic charge.
All right, it's going to work for you. Just underneath one sack.
The pack detonates and stains a thief when he crosses sensors at the bank's exit.
Safe is tied in.
Silent alarms made it possible for tellers to call the police without alerting the robbers.
Wait till they get out. Once you press that button,
Video cameras monitored every corner of the bank.
They'll take a picture about every 7 seconds.
So far, Hollywood had somehow managed to defeat all these measures. July 13th, 1994. Hollywood attacked his 10th bank in 2 years. He used a stun gun to threaten bank employees. A teller risked her life pushing a silent alarm.
754 North Independence, Westlake Bank and Trust, robbery in progress.
Hollywood looted the cash drawer, unaware that patrol units were racing to the scene.
Shut up and don't touch anybody! Get away from me, don't touch anybody. Go! All right, good.
He fled with nearly $112,000. A witness outside the bank saw him get into a dark blue Dodge Caravan. The second person drove it. The witness was unable to see the vehicle's license tag. After police secured the scene, another bank employee arrived for work.
Oh, very good, thank you. Just tell me what you saw.
He told police about an incident on the previous day. The employee noticed a man taking notes in front of the bank. standing next to a blue Dodge Caravan. The witness said he was too far away to get a good look at his
Look, I
face.
appreciate you coming forward, and if you can think of any other details. please
To
don't
Agent
hesitate to
Johnson,
give us a call.
it appeared
No
that
problem.
Hollywood studied the locations before striking.
He would scout out the banks days before, get a feel for the layout, who came, who went from the bank at given times.
Hollywood's planning was paying off. He had gotten away with over $660,000. He struck most often on Wednesdays or Thursdays. The next time he appeared was 6 months later. As he filled his bag, the teller overheard a radio call from beneath his coat urging him to exit. When he passed the bank's sensors, a dye pack exploded. For the first time, he had failed in a robbery attempt. A witness outside the bank took down the license plate number of the getaway car. Special Agent Johnson was able to trace the vehicle.
We ran the license plates from the cars, and they came back to a couple who lived in Tacoma, Washington, south of Seattle. So I went and talked to the couple to find out how their car had been sold.
They had advertised the car in a local paper.
He did ask if it run, and we told him
The buyer paid $1,200 in cash without test driving it. The couple described the buyer as a white male in his late 30s or early 40s, of medium height and weight. Based on their description, a sketch artist created a likeness of the suspect.
Gee, I think that looks a lot.
The FBI now had their first glimpse of what Hollywood might look like. By the spring of 1995, a masked Seattle gunman had robbed 12 banks of nearly $1 million and left behind few clues. Investigators dubbed him Hollywood for his use of disguises and theatrical makeup. The only lead that agents had was a sketch of what they believed was the face behind the mask. Special Agent Sean Johnson looked for a pattern. If he could figure out similarities among the banks Hollywood robbed, perhaps he could predict when and where he would strike next.
I went back and visited all the banks that Hollywood had hit since June of '92. What I was looking for was some commonality. How many doors were in the banks? What was the layout of the lobby? Where was the vault located? Was it downstairs, upstairs, on the main floor? What was the size of the parking lot? Was it adjacent to the bank? Was it across the street? What kind of street was this bank located on?
Johnson discovered that most of the banks were in commercial districts where area businesses made their deposits. The banks also bordered residential areas. This enabled Hollywood to blend into the surrounding neighborhood without arousing suspicion.
He liked three areas of the city primarily, the northeast part of town, Madison Park, which was just outside of downtown, and West Seattle. So once again, looking at the types of banks he hit, the branches themselves, and areas of the city, we came up with a pattern of likely targets.
In March of 1995, 3 years after Hollywood's initial heist, the Puget Sound Violent Crimes Task Force was formed. Staffed with investigators from 5 different agencies, they had one goal in mind: to take Hollywood off the streets. Hollywood struck most often around noon, and almost always on the last 3 days of the work week. 4 of his past 5 robberies occurred in late January or early February. Agents calculated that Hollywood appeared to be going through about $20,000 a month. Detective Mike McGann joined the task force in June of 1995. McGann knew the streets and had many bank robbery collars to his credit.
It was my belief that at least 95% of the people that I arrested were narcotics users. The other 5% I believe to be gamblers, thrill seekers, professionals, or people that were working out of sheer desperation. Where I'd classify Hollywood was that he was a well-trained, well-disciplined professional.
McGann pored over the security camera photos of Hollywood. He noted the weapons he brandished were a 9mm Glock and a stun gun. At the time, these arms were being considered as weapons of choice among law enforcement. The detective also noticed that Hollywood indexed his trigger finger on the side of the 9mm, a technique taught to police officers. Many of the robberies occurred in the late morning, between 11 a.m. and noon, precisely the time when a shift change for the Seattle police occurred. The evidence pointed to a frightening possibility. Hollywood might be a cop.
And the reason I thought he was a police officer is he knew so much about how we operated, that he was probably watching us or listening to us. He was disciplined. He was in and out of the banks quickly. He moved swiftly. He just knew a lot about the policy procedures of the bank. He knew that the areas that he was hitting in were primarily residential areas that don't have much police presence in them.
Then something else caught his eye. He noticed that Hollywood was wearing a radio on his belt. If Hollywood was communicating with a walkie, perhaps police could intercept the transmission. The detective contacted an electronics expert known as the Glitch. With his help, McGann hoped to gain an advantage.
Rectangle, gray, brown, right.
I had sat down with this person and showed him the surveillance photographs of Hollywood and the two-way radio he had, and he was able to determine the frequency most common to those radios that he would work off, and it was 2 different frequencies.
The Glitch offered to rig up a scanner in McGann's unmarked car. By eavesdropping on Hollywood, investigators hoped they could pinpoint his whereabouts and catch him in the act. The idea didn't work. Special Agent Johnson was stationed outside a bank in northeast Seattle, monitoring the radio, when Hollywood and an accomplice struck elsewhere.
It's about 11:30. I was going to break off about 12 o'clock, and all of a sudden I heard the Seattle police radio saying we've had a bank robbery, First Interstate Bank, and that was about 2 miles from my location. I heard the physical description. I knew at that point it was Hollywood, and he had come back on one of those 3 days I predicted a year before, and we just missed him.
A bystander outside the bank got the license number. Like his first robbery, the getaway car was found in a neighborhood near the bank. The FBI traced the car back to its owner, who said he had sold it to a man for cash a few weeks earlier.
I had the owner come up and look at the vehicle, and I said, "Is there anything different about this car from when you sold it?" And he said, "Sure."
Overall condition of your engine compartment here, is anything?
The owner noticed the car had a new battery.
Different here? You notice any difference? I was about to say.
Agents found that the car had been wiped down inside and out. The owner also noticed that 2 of the tires had been replaced with newer ones.
So I went to trace the tires, found out they'd been bought in Tacoma, Washington. The battery was bought at a Sears store in Tacoma about 2 days after the car was purchased. So I knew at that point that these people, whether it was Hollywood and or his partners, were in the area at least 2 months before the robberies.
Working with a sketch artist, the owner described the buyer. Investigators now had 2 composite sketches, but they were still no closer to catching Hollywood. Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser was brought in to head the task force. She made the decision to go on the offensive.
It's one thing to put pen to paper and to put your thought processes at work and try to solve a case. It's another when you take a proactive posture in an investigation, knowing that you might get into a confrontation with somebody like Hollywood.
The supervisor realized that a more aggressive stance would place her agents in greater peril. Hollywood had repeatedly threatened to kill anyone who tried to stop him.
We knew he had a propensity for violence and figured that if he was going to these elaborate means to disguise himself to plan the robberies, that he probably would not necessarily give up easily as most others did. And we were concerned about safety of law enforcement and safety of customers and employees of the banks.
Okay, he's taking a lot of care.
More personnel were assigned to specific areas of the city, targeting the banks hit most often by Hollywood.
So he came up with a game plan saying, okay, we're going to be out on the streets on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays between these periods of time, knowing full well that greed would probably take the better part of Hollywood and he would come back and rob another bank, even with the amount of money he'd already taken.
On May 22, 1996, despite the increased presence of law enforcement, Hollywood hit the first interstate bank in the affluent suburb of Madison Park. It was his 14th known robbery. To generate leads, agents reached out to the community.
We increased the reward to $50,000 that we were offering in the community for tips. We didn't want to have the media work against us. Now, we didn't want to glamorize Hollywood and cause copycat bank robbers to go out and rob banks. But we also felt that we needed the public.
Agents saturated Madison Park with hundreds of wanted flyers. Perhaps heightened public awareness could also help eliminate that neighborhood as a potential target. Then, law enforcement could increase manpower in the remaining neighborhoods. The campaign yielded nothing. Hollywood had not surfaced in months. They consulted a police profiler to learn how Hollywood might react if and when he was cornered.
Could be someone who is familiar or someone who was taken out of.
Based on his broad knowledge of violent criminal behavior, the profiler told them that Hollywood would not go quietly.
And it was very important for us to hear him say, this guy is going to resist arrest. This guy will not want to go into custody. This guy will fight you. This guy is dangerous.
Authorities could only guess when and where Hollywood would strike next, and if his gun would remain silent. For almost 4 years, Hollywood had threatened to shoot anyone who got in his way. Agents were convinced that if he was challenged, the masked gunman would shoot to kill.
Do you understand? Get down!
By 1996, a masked gunman known only as Hollywood had robbed 14 Seattle banks.
Didn't trip off any alarms.
He threatened to kill dozens of people for his take of $1.2 million over 4 years. Though Hollywood had not fired his weapon, agents believed that if confronted, he would kill. Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser showed the task force a videotape of what could happen if they were not prepared.
We have been using for training in the FBI a video of the tragic firefight that took place in 1986 in Miami, where we lost 2 of our agents and several other agents were wounded. What they were doing that day is they were on a surveillance for 2 dangerous bank robbery suspects. So there were some obvious parallels to what we were doing.
On April 11th, 1986, the FBI confronted 2 armed bank robbers in Miami. A shootout erupted. The gunmen advanced while the agents were reloading their revolvers, killing 2 of them and seriously wounding 5 others.
That Miami shootout was a reminder of how high the stakes were. We can't always be 100% prepared, but we should be thinking, have a plan.
All right, come on.
Set. Moving.
To avoid repeating the tragedy that occurred in Miami, Glasser developed more uniform procedures between the various agencies. The Seattle SWAT team trained alongside Special Agent Johnson.
We did extensive training with them, firearms training, felony car stops, how to take people out of cars, different situations and how we'd respond to a bank robbery that Hollywood had committed. And that was all done under Ellen Glasser's supervision. And her #1 concern, of course, was the safety of all the people involved.
FBI, get out, get out, get out!
Detective McGann knew they needed to make sure all personnel were on the same page.
It also gave us a chance to test our communications because the FBI doesn't work off police communications, they had their own. So what we had to do is get everybody on board on the same radio frequency.
To prevent the danger of friendly fire, all personnel were required to wear clothing with emblazoned logos.
It looked really good otherwise, but you had your head up just a little too long.
As Thanksgiving approached, Glasser believed they were as prepared as they could be.
360 is all around, it's not just...
Well, that Wednesday, that day before Thanksgiving in 1996, it started out just like any other day. I went to work thinking I was going to catch up on some of my overdue paperwork, thinking that I was looking forward to the holiday the next day, having a day off, the banks would be closed, and thinking that people needed a rest because they had been working so hard.
Agent Glasser, Detective McGann, and Detective Pete Erickson were the last ones in the office when an alert tone came over the radio at 5:41.
And upon hearing that, I knew that it was Hollywood that had hit. And I'm looking around the office thinking, well, Pete's here. And I looked at him and said, do you want to go? He goes, oh yeah, let's go. And Ellen saw me run down the hall and she's yelling, Mike, what's going on? I said, Hollywood hit, do you want to go? She goes, yes. So she grabbed her coat and we all left the task force office. And my car was parked right outside the front door. We ran down and turned on the lights and the siren and put the light on the roof and away we went.
Multiple suspects had robbed a bank in Lake City, the Seattle suburb just minutes from task force headquarters.
As soon as we got into Mike's car, I could hear the Seattle police radio traffic. And I remember hearing the references to the makeup. And it was really those references to the pancake makeup that made it resonate in my head that this was it. This was it.
They got another call. A witness had seen a vehicle exit the bank's parking lot in an erratic manner. A vehicle matching the description had been spotted. The police believed they had found the getaway car. It turned out to be a false alarm. The engine was cold. 20 minutes had passed since the first call. McGann was sure that Hollywood had transferred to a different vehicle by now.
He would need a place to change. He would need a place to take that makeup off, that wig off, to change his clothing, to put the weapons, so put the weapons away, or the money. The getaway car there would most likely be a van.
Detective McGann continued to cruise the side streets in the residential area near the bank. From past robberies, McGann and Agent Glasser knew this was where he would most likely change vehicles.
Some units were responding to one location, and Mike was saying, that's not him, that's not him. He'd patrolled in these streets, he'd grown up in Seattle, he knew every nook and cranny of the town in that area.
After several minutes of crisscrossing the main roads, they pulled up behind a white van.
And there was condensation on the insides of the windows. I mean, heavy condensation where the beads of water were dripping down on the insides of the van. But there were flashlights moving about the van, real quick light, and it had dark windows, tinted windows on it.
McGann had a strong suspicion it was Hollywood. They called in to check the plates. The driver of the van ignored the emergency lights and pulled away.
Dispatch. Vehicle.
The investigators had no way of knowing how many persons were in the van, or if they had any weapons. If it was Hollywood, they knew at the very least he would be carrying a 9mm Glock.
By this time, I knew he knew we were behind him. He could see me. He just knew we were there. And he drove northbound and slowly came to a stop.
They prepared to approach the idling van.
Good!
When I got out, all I saw was this person holding the rifle at port arms and stepped out from the side and took aim at me with that rifle. And right then I feared that I was going to be shot and killed.
The rifle jammed. McGann fired into the rear of the van. The chase had turned into a firefight.
Get in.
On the night before Thanksgiving 1996, 3 investigators had just fired at a fleeing van after its driver had attempted to shoot them with a rifle. They believe the van held a man known only as Hollywood, an elusive bank robber. Special Agent Sean Johnson responded to the call for backup.
My pager went off. I looked at it and knew immediately there had been a bank robbery. I called the office and was told that Hollywood, based on the description that they had gotten, Hollywood had just robbed a bank, Seafirst Bank, Lake City branch in the north part of town.
Still several miles away, Johnson raced to the location. As the van came to another stop, backup arrived. The gunman ducked back into the van and the chase resumed. Special Agent Glasser felt it was a miracle the 3 of them had survived unharmed.
I think that's partially by the grace of God, because these rounds were found in the windshield of the car that was behind us, so they went right over us.
They continued to pursue the unidentified gunman through the residential neighborhood. The agent updated their new position for approaching units. They followed the van until it disappeared around a turn. Fearful he might be driving into an ambush, McGann got out and continued the pursuit on foot. Detective McGann told a canine officer to cover the right side while he moved up on the left.
And I'm trying to think, am I doing everything right? I'm alive, there's no bullet holes in me, my coworkers are alive, plenty of help is behind us. And I knew plenty of help was in front of us, coming at us.
Up ahead, they could see the lights from an approaching Seattle police cruiser. It intercepted the van, forcing it off the road. The van had come to rest in the front yard of a house. Investigators still had no idea how many were in the vehicle.
Right. Out of the van! Keep your hands where we can see them! Doors are open!
The side doors burst open, but no one came out.
Cover me! Out of the van! Keep your hands out where we can see them! Keep your hands out!
2 men, badly wounded, were pulled from the van.
Keep your hands out!
One suspect had taken 3 rounds. The bullets had penetrated his left shoulder, thigh, and stomach. The other had been hit in his right shoulder.
When I looked down at him and said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Steve." I said, "Steve what?" And he said, "Steve Myers." And I said, "Are you Hollywood?" And he says, "No."
The other suspect was taller and heavier than the gunman from the security camera photos. Police believed he was not Hollywood either. The detective turned his attention to the van, but no one else was inside.
And I'm thinking, where's the third suspect? You're saying the suspect got out. Are you positive? And they're saying, yes, he got out when he saw us. He took off. So I'm thinking, oh my God.
Investigators quickly organized a search, both on the ground and in the air. A third suspect, probably Hollywood, was on the run. Police believed he was armed. They did not know how far he could get if he was wounded. As the search continued, a forensics team processed the van.
And in the back of the van, there was a guitar case that had been converted into a gun-carrying case, and a blue nylon bag that had money in it. And it was a big bag of money.
The robbers had left behind more than $1 million. They also found pieces of a latex mask, most likely belonging to Hollywood. Scattered around the blood-soaked interior, investigators found an assault rifle, a semi-automatic shotgun, 2 pistols, and several boxes of ammunition. Hollywood's Glock 9mm pistol was nowhere to be found.
Could have taken hostage in a house, yeah. That did cross my mind that, you know, maybe he ran into a house and was holding a family hostage and would hold them until, you know, the early hours of the morning, or until traffic died out, or he could be watching us. He could be one of us.
Wherever he was and whoever he was, Hollywood had eluded the FBI once more. After 4 years of pursuit, the masked bank robber known as Hollywood had eluded capture again following his 15th known bank robbery. But 2 of his accomplices had been taken into custody. One was identified as Mark Biggins. Biggins had been Hollywood's accomplice in 3 of the robberies, including their first. He wore the Reagan mask. The other accomplice was Steve Myers, the man who drove Hollywood's getaway cars. Special Agent Johnson pressed Myers for Hollywood's real name.
You need to tell me who this person is, where he is. And he finally said, okay, I'll tell you. The person you're looking for is Scott Scurlock.
Scott Scurlock wasn't a police officer. He was a local actor. Agents moved in on his 20-acre ranch in Olympia, Washington, an hour south of Seattle.
Yeah, search warrant. Clear left.
But no one was there.
Clear.
Investigators found a semi-automatic 9mm Glock.
Okay. Shoot up. Number 9. All right, check it out.
Agents recovered $23,000 in cash. The searchers also found a dozen pairs of canvas athletic shoes, the same kind that Hollywood was reported to have worn in several robberies.
Check over here.
Behind the house, agents approached a barn.
All right, clear left. Clear.
Inside, they found tools, building materials, and equipment. On the dusty floor, one of the agents noticed some footprints that led to a trap door. It opened into an underground chamber.
See a light switch anywhere?
Right here.
Agents had no way of knowing if Hollywood was hiding there with a gun. Skurlock wasn't there. But behind a curtain, they discovered a second room. It was a complete makeup studio. The agents also found a photograph of Skurlock without makeup.
Is this who we've been looking for? It's gotta be. Is this Hollywood? That's the man. It's gotta be him.
Behind the barn, Special Agent Sean Johnson and his team came across a large treehouse.
It sat about 60 feet up into the trees. It was built on 7 cedar trees. It consisted of 3 stories. It had numerous ramps that extended out from the treehouse. It was something to behold.
Agents searched the treehouse. They found no sign of Skurlock. Police were still patrolling the neighborhood where the shootout had occurred the night before. Searchers had combed the area, but found no trace of the fugitive. Then a report came in that a man had spotted someone hiding in a camper behind his mother's house.
Come out of the trailer.
Police responded and approached the camper.
Sir, police officer, come out of the trailer.
They identified themselves, but received no response. An officer emptied a can of pepper spray into the window.
Police, come out of the trailer.
A shot rang out.
Chief, get some backup.
Police set up a perimeter around the camper and called in reinforcements. Agent Johnson had just returned from searching Skurlock's property.
Within minutes of arriving at the office, having not even unloaded the evidence, I heard on the Seattle police radio shots had been exchanged at a location about 2 blocks away from the previous night's events. So without even beginning to unload the evidence, I took off again, heading northbound out of town, lights and sirens to this location.
Every available unit converged on the site. Supervisory Special Agent Glasser had gone home after the shootout.
By that point in time, I had decided not to cook a turkey on Thanksgiving. I had changed the reservations for where we were going to eat Thanksgiving to a later time so that we could all be together as a family. And we were almost out the door when we got a call from the office that Hollywood was barricaded in a trailer.
No other shots had been fired since that first exchange.
Come on, Scott, come out. Just show up.
Skurlock's girlfriend was brought to the scene. If it was the fugitive, perhaps she could persuade him to give himself up.
Come on, Scott, come out.
There was no response. Nobody knew for sure who was in the camper. Out of options, the SWAT team was called to action. Hoping to flush out the suspect, they fired 2 rounds of tear gas into his refuge. They heard nothing. SWAT members entered cautiously.
And the initial radio communication from the SWAT team said there's lots of blood, but we see no body. And my first reaction to that was, is this guy a ghost or what? How can there be no body? And then just seconds later they say, we've got a body.
Through the smoke, a white male could be seen lying lifeless on the floor. A gun near his head. Skurlock's photograph was compared to the body. It matched. The coroner later determined that his death had been self-inflicted. Mark Biggins recovered from his wounds. He and Steve Myers pled guilty to bank robbery, assault on a federal officer, and firearms violations. They were sentenced to 21 years in a federal prison. Scott Skurlock had hidden behind a mask for 4.5 years. But when the FBI struck back, the man they called Hollywood found there was no place left to hide. In the mid-1990s, a gang of professional bank robbers raided cities across 7 states. Disguises and speed protected their identity from cameras and the police. They stole hundreds of thousands of dollars, always leaving a bomb to terrorize their victims. With no leads and little evidence, the FBI had to find the bandits before someone got killed.
Across the Midwest, a band of armed robbers struck banks at the rate of nearly 1 per month. They attacked with lightning precision and lethal force. They were in and out in 5 minutes. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The stakes were raised when the FBI discovered the robbers had an agenda beyond personal wealth. To stop these violent extremists, the FBI need to capture their terrorist leaders.
In 1994, the citizens of Ames, Iowa enjoyed the peaceful life provided by a small college town. Many newcomers had moved to Ames because of the area's low crime rate. On January 25th at 10:30 in the morning, 2 men entered a bank in town.
All right, this is a robbery! Everybody down on the floor! Down, down, down on the ground! Down, get on the
They
floor!
wore ski masks and held semi-automatic pistols. They ordered everyone to the floor. The teller managed to set off a silent alarm without being seen. The FBI office in nearby Des Moines was alerted to the robbery in progress. The agency had primary investigative jurisdiction in crimes involving federally insured money. Agents immediately responded, but they were 30 miles away from the bank. The bandits quickly emptied the cash drawers.
Don't look at me, face the ground.
One of them pulled out what appeared to be a bomb. He warned that no one should move for 5 minutes or it would explode. The employees and customers evacuated as soon as they could.
Well, you know, we said a
The local police cordoned off the bank as explosive experts worked inside.
Okay.
The bomb proved to be a diversion. 2 road flares bound with duct tape. The employees described how one of the gunmen leaped over the counter to grab the money. They grabbed thousands in cash and were in and out of the bank in less than 5 minutes. Agents interviewed the witnesses.
So did you guys want to add anything else?
They said the gunmen sometimes used Spanish when talking to each other. The security camera provided photographs of the robbery. Ski masks effectively hid the faces of the assailants. But investigators had images of their disguises and their weapons. 9mm semi-automatics. Because the perpetrators wore gloves, they did not leave any fingerprints. Detectives used electrostatic tape to recover a footprint from the counter. The precautions taken by the bandits had effectively obscured their identities. Special Agent Ken Moore of the Des Moines, Iowa FBI field office was immediately concerned that they were dealing with dangerous professionals.
Now, most bank robbers try to enter banks as quietly as possible, go up to one teller counter and proceed to rob the bank, and then leave as quietly as they can. These individuals came in very violently, fast.
Agent Moore wanted to apprehend the suspects as quickly as he could. But the FBI had nothing of value to lead to their identity. Several weeks later, a communique came into the Des Moines office. It alerted area FBI of a February 15th bank robbery in Davenport, Iowa. Agents contacted the Davenport office to see if the incident might be related.
Hello? Yes, well, I think we're working on
The agent described 2 gunmen wearing ski masks and black overcoats that had invaded a Davenport bank. The thieves used the same Spanish phrases as the Des Moines bandits. They also hopped over the counter to empty the cash drawers. There was one significant difference. This time, the bandits left a real explosive, a pipe bomb instead of a fake. Fortunately, the detonator was missing. Disarming it had slowed down the investigation.
What that device does is it requires more manpower that could be out conducting an active investigation. Instead, they're at the bank making sure things are safe.
Investigators believed that the similarities between the incidents were more than coincidental.
After the Davenport bank robbery, we realized that the same individuals were responsible for both bank robberies. This was our first connection to possible serial bank robbers.
Okay. See you later. Have a good night.
In the next 4 months, Cincinnati, Green Bay, and Kansas City suffered similar crimes.
There appeared to be a pattern of their robberies. There appeared to be 2 regions where they were robbing banks, the Midwest region as well as the Ohio region. We were trying to logically connect those 2 regions and why banks were being robbed that way.
The robberies occurred between 10 and 11 in the morning when banks were less populated. Each time, the bandits were out in less than 5 minutes, always leaving an inert bomb as they fled. The wide geographic spread of targets made their next moves impossible to predict.
I'll get back with you.
The FBI needed to find some evidence that would lead to the suspects. On June 8, 1994, the bandits hit a bank in Springdale, Ohio. They drove away with over $11,000. A bystander saw them use a brown Chevrolet as their getaway car. On June 17th, a security guard became suspicious of a car on his employer's lot. It had been sitting for a week without anyone claiming it. He saw a police scanner. He also spotted a pager next to a stained $20 bill. A Springdale officer came out to check the car. He began a search to ascertain the vehicle's ownership. He made an effort to force open the glove compartment. A grenade tumbled out. The hand grenade turned out to be another inert explosive, but its presence linked the car to the bank robbery. Agents used the car's serial numbers to track down the dealership where it had been sold. They talked to the salesman who had handled the deal. The sale had been made less than 2 weeks earlier, but he couldn't give a description of the buyer. The dead ends left investigators feeling the pressure.
We were becoming frustrated because the escalation of violence seemed to have been increasing. They were more brazen, were brandishing firearms, scaring bank employees. They were scaring customers, leaving behind booby traps. So we were very frustrated and we were concerned.
On December 27th, the bandits finished 1994 with their 12th robbery in as many months. They hit a bank outside St. Louis. This time, there were 4 gunmen.
Now we were concerned over possible takeovers of banks, possible entry into the bank vault. With 4 people, there's a lot more they can do.
Bystanders at the St. Louis robbery saw the bandits put on their ski masks before entering the building. A teller got a glimpse of one of them inside the bank. These witnesses helped FBI artists make composite sketches of the suspects. The FBI distributed the drawings to other agencies and the media.
It was slightly curved.
They hoped it might bring someone forward who might know something more. The television and news reports generated hundreds of calls into the FBI offices. Agents followed up on all credible tips, but none provided any lead value. The assailants communicated with the media as well. They sent letters and cartoons to newspapers. The correspondents ridiculed federal agents and their attempts to catch them. In one letter, the gang dubbed themselves the Midwestern Bank Bandits. The bandits sent another message to authorities in one of their getaway cars. An investigator searched a vehicle used in a robbery near St. Louis. On the front seat, the gang had left a newspaper clipping about Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. In less than 2 years, the bandits had hit at least 15 banks across the Midwest. By the end of August 1995, agents from 7 states and FBI headquarters gathered in Louisville, Kentucky.
If we can get a shadow or something to raise the serial number on this.
All the offices were now working together to identify and apprehend the suspects. All information and leads were to be channeled through a single office, then distributed to the others.
Right, we'll work on that. See if we can't raise the serial number or something off it.
Special Agent Moore in Des Moines served as the point man.
The meeting also resulted in all case agents going back to their office, reviewing all files to see if there's anything they may have missed or anything of lead value that might assist us in identifying the suspects.
Supervisory Special Agent David Welker found a phone tip that came into his Cincinnati office after a June 1994 robbery. The informant had named 2 men as the leaders of the Midwestern bank bandits, Peter Langen and Richard Guthrie.
We determined at the time that they had criminal backgrounds, that as we set out our leads, that they had been arrested in Georgia for the robbery of a Pizza Hut. And then we found also at the time that the U.S. Secret Service had looked at Langen as a result of threats made to the president.
At the arrest, police seized semi-automatic guns and grenades, weapons similar to those used by the bank bandits. The suspects served a brief prison sentence before being released. Agent Welker was able to pull their mugshots. He compared the photographs with the artist's sketches made after the St. Louis robberies.
And they were so close then that it was phenomenal. It appeared that the composite artist used these photographs to draw the composite drawings. That's how close they were.
Agents now had names for the gunmen. In pursuing them, the FBI was about to uncover a far more deadly plot than bank robbery. In 1995, the FBI hunted the Midwestern bank bandits. The day before Thanksgiving, the 4 gunmen struck another bank in St. Louis, their 21st robbery. Their disguise included ATF hats, the same caps worn by federal agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They also left their signature pipe bomb. None of these explosive devices had gone off. They had either been inert or lacking detonators. By now, agents knew how to defuse the bombs themselves. They weren't going to let the ruse slow the investigation down anymore. Supervisory Special Agent David Welker of the Cincinnati office had names for 2 of the bandits. But Peter Langen and Richard Guthrie were living underground, surfacing only when they struck another bank.
Clearly, we've identified the right people. We're trying to develop as much information about these people and their contacts as possible. But the best part about it is we have leads to follow.
In the intervening months, the informant who had provided the names had moved from Ohio.
The first set of robberies to tear gas
canister.
Special Agent Ed Woods of the Cincinnati FBI field office tracked the informant to Georgia, where he lived with his new wife and child.
This fella had been an associate of Langen and Guthrie in the past, had removed himself from that lifestyle and was starting a new life for himself. And I think he was ready to put all that behind him. So when I interviewed him, he cooperated fully.
I need to ask you a few questions.
The informant had met Langen in 1991 at a white supremacist rally.
The Bible says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife,
They shared similar beliefs about race and government. A year later, Langan proclaimed his intention to form the Aryan Republican Army. It was going to start a revolution against Washington and its federal agencies like the FBI and ATF.
It's your tax money they're taking.
Langan had been inspired by the Order, an established terrorist group.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? You're breaking your back. You know what I'm saying?
The Order had financed their racist agenda by robbing $4 million from banks and armored cars.
Hey, how's it going?
That evening, Langan introduced Guthrie as his compatriot.
Explain all about that.
2 months before the first bank robbery, they asked the informant to become a member of the Aryan Army.
Well, I've got some stuff here. I think that
He declined to join the new gang,
we can certainly use some of it. Yeah, here.
but he did agree to pitch in.
What we got from this cooperating witness was the scope of their activities, the surgical planning for their bank robbery activities, the fact that now we learned for the first time that their activities aren't just bank robbery and criminal matters. It relates to white supremacy.
The informant helped Langan case the bank in Springdale, Ohio. But before that June 1994 robbery, the informant had a change of heart and cut himself off from the bandits.
Concerts sometimes, things like that.
He had participated enough to be charged as an
I need you
accomplice.
to help as we go on here.
The FBI promised not to prosecute him if he assisted.
That'll be for right now.
They were ready
I
to make a
appreciate it.
deal to capture Langan and Guthrie.
Once we determined that they had broken off other white supremacist organizations to form their own, it certainly ratcheted the investigation up just another notch.
Agent Welker suspected it was only a matter of time before the Midwestern bank bandits turned their racial prejudice into violence. The gang was back in Cincinnati, hitting another bank in December 1995. During their escape, one of the bandits bumped into a teenager. The gunman demanded her purse. She refused to comply. Only the sound of approaching sirens prevented the young woman from being seriously hurt. Betting that the bandits were still in the area, Agent Welker brought the informant to Cincinnati.
You know the fellows that are involved.
Upon arriving, the informant agreed to re-enter the white supremacist movement.
Make sure that he has your pager.
Agents instructed him to page the FBI when he made contact with the suspects.
So, say what you
But investigators became frustrated when more than a week passed without any results.
Since he's been here for a week and a half and has provided no information at all and has arranged no meeting, has virtually done nothing, I was more than skeptical as to what this cooperating witness could do for us. And I was prepared to send him home because of my disbelief at the time.
At 2:30 in the morning of January 17th, 1996, the informant paged the FBI. The call roused investigators from sleep to a secret meeting. The informant claimed to have found Guthrie. He was finishing dinner with a friend when Guthrie unexpectedly showed up. The informant invented a reason for being in Cincinnati and engaged the suspect in small talk.
Got a minute, I can talk to you outside. Sure, come on. Hey, you got a minute?
Guthrie invited him out to his van to continue the conversation in private.
Where are you chilling?
While they sat in the parking lot, the suspect asked his old friend to reconsider joining the gang.
Some serious stuff here, isn't it? You talking about a little bit.
Guthrie showed off an assault rifle and a bag of armor-piercing bullets.
Yeah,
The informant provided a partial license plate number and description of Guthrie's van. Agents still doubted his credibility.
So I had Agent Woods arrange to have the cooperating witness in the FBI office at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. I didn't want him to know why he was there. I just wanted him to be there. And then I arranged for my division's polygraph examiner to be there, and I wanted a polygraph of him. I wanted to make sure that what he was telling us was true.
The informant agreed to take a lie detector test.
I think he's lying. You think he's lying?
It's all over the place.
Give him a chance and he didn't tell us.
The examiner determined that the young man had been deceptive in his answers during the test.
I'm telling the truth. Listen.
The piece of paper there, this polygraph doesn't lie.
Listen,
He insisted he was telling the truth.
Make a quick phone call, please. Let me make one phone call.
What's that?
I can prove it. I can
give
prove
you
it.
one more
phone
chance.
call. Yes,
One
come on.
call. Make it a good one.
To prove it, he placed a call to the friend with whom he had had dinner.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Good, man. Yeah.
The speakerphone allowed the agents to hear everything.
Hey, what happened with you and Guthrie, man? He took you out in the van. Yeah, Guthrie wants you in, man. Yeah.
Without prompting, the
Yeah,
friend
we did. We
immediately
spent some
asked
time
about his
together.
time with Guthrie.
So now we had to make a decision, and the decision is, do we believe the polygraph or do we believe the phone call? I think at the time, I think the decision we made was the right one. That is, we have to believe the phone call. It was an unprovoked response by the friend.
The informant arranged to meet Guthrie on Monday at their mutual friend's apartment. FBI agents assembled an arrest team. They staked out the location, ready to capture the suspect when he arrived. The informant waited inside the apartment. The friend did not know why the meeting had been arranged. Guthrie had promised to come sometime between 4 and 5 p.m. 5 o'clock came and went without the white supremacist arriving. The informant knew that more than his credibility was at stake. So was his cooperation agreement. If the FBI believed he had deceived them, they would turn him over to prosecutors for bank robbery. At 5:20, there was still no sign of Guthrie. It looked like the suspect would not show up. Outside, the arrest team grew impatient.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, he's here.
It was Guthrie on the phone. He said they could meet at a nearby pizza restaurant in 30 minutes.
All right, 30 minutes. Campbell, you down?
Yeah.
The informant needed to get word to the arrest team. He told his buddy he was going out for cigarettes. The informant told the agents about the call.
Yeah. The meeting's been changed just a little bit. We're meeting just a little bit up the road. Everything's still fine though, okay?
I think he's telling us the truth.
I hope he is. Otherwise, he's going to jail. Okay, guys.
They alerted the SWAT team to the new location. Several cars set out for the pizza parlor. The agents could not help but wonder if this was the location or just another diversion. Along the way, traffic separated the arrest team. One agent was passing a convenience store parking lot when he spotted Guthrie. He turned around and radioed to the others that the suspect had been sighted. Guthrie got into his van and started driving. The agent stayed on the van's tail, hoping the rest of the team would catch up. He was alone, following a suspect considered highly dangerous. But he was determined not to let Richard Guthrie get away. In January 1996, the FBI pursued Richard Guthrie. The suspect was wanted for 22 bank robberies. An agent separated from the arrest team had spotted the suspect at a Cincinnati parking lot and began tailing his van. He reported by radio his progress to the others.
You got him in a cul-de-sac. Where are you?
Guthrie noticed that he was being followed. An informant had reported that he was armed with automatic weapons and armor-piercing bullets. The suspect tried to lose his tail. The arrest team caught up with the lone agent and joined the chase. Guthrie couldn't shake them. He unwittingly turned into a cul-de-sac. Trapped, he abandoned his van. Agent Ed Wood sprinted right behind. He caught up to the gunman.
It was almost as if it was in slow motion where like you could almost read his mind, what he's thinking. He's thinking, I believe, is this it? Is this the last standoff of this white supremacist? And quite frankly, what I expected him to do was to turn and start firing.
Guthrie came to a riverbank. He had no escape. Agents boxed him in.
I've been in law enforcement for over 20 years, and I've never seen a look on a face like Guthrie's at the time. And Guthrie, as he was looking at us, he was deciding whether he wanted to die right then. He was deciding whether he wanted to pull a gun and take on everybody who was standing there.
The suspect chose to live. He submitted to arrest.
Catching him, it was a huge relief, and catching him to where there was no violence attached to the arrest was even a greater relief.
Once in custody, Guthrie began talking. He told investigators how he stayed in touch with the other primary suspect, Peter Langan.
What are these numbers right here?
The friends used coded voicemails to contact one another. He handed over his pager and PIN number.
Now, how about this one right here?
He claimed his next meeting with Langan was to be in Indianapolis.
John, did you get that?
Guthrie's lawyer made an agreement with the FBI. For later consideration in sentencing, they could take the suspect with them to use as bait. Under the arrangement, the accompanying agents weren't allowed to question Guthrie about his crimes. Agent Welker sought another way to ply information from the bandits' leader.
I assigned 2 agents to guard him. One agent is a former Harrier pilot in the Marine Corps, and the other is our principal firearms instructor. And of course, over a 2-day period, there was a lot of discussion going on. I was well aware that Guthrie had an interest in flying, and he had a keen interest in weapons.
During the trip, the agents engaged Guthrie in long conversations about common interests. The congenial strategy worked. The assailant warmed up to his accompanying agents and began volunteering information on the robberies. Guthrie admitted that he had lied to investigators. His rendezvous was really supposed to take place in Columbus, Ohio, not Indianapolis, where the investigators had taken him.
2709 control.
He gave them the address of a safe house. He told them Langan was heavily armed. he would not come out without a fight. An FBI arrest team assembled the next morning in Columbus. Langan's van was parked next to the duplex Guthrie had described. The plan was to wait until the suspect exited his home and got into his van. Then as he pulled out, FBI cars would box him in. This would contain him and prevent a vehicular pursuit. All escape avenues were blocked off. At 9:30 a.m., Langan left the duplex carrying a canvas bag. Agents suspected this held an assault weapon. He got into his van, but failed to start the engine. The arrest team waited for the word.
Once he was observed getting into the van, the adrenaline for everyone there was flowing. Everyone knew something was going to happen.
The suspect sat motionless. Agents didn't know if he was planning something. He seemed as if he anticipated the arrest. Finally, the signal went out to move in.
Let's take him, let's take him.
In what agents thought was a suicide move, Langan had decided to put up a fight. On January 18, 1996, the suspected leader of 22 bank robberies decided to shoot it out with an FBI SWAT team. Supervisory Special Agent David Welker of the Cincinnati office led the arrest team.
Someone who's going to pull a gun on 20 or more FBI agents is one nasty dude. He's one nasty criminal.
Peter Langan was one gun against many. SWAT team bullets pummeled the van. It was over within moments, but not before 50 rounds had been fired. Langan survived and surrendered. Despite the hail of bullets, he suffered only minor injuries to the face and back. After 2 years of pursuit, the leaders of the Midwestern bank bandits were now in custody. 2 other accomplices remained at large. The van was filled with semi-automatic guns, ammunition, and grenades. Inside the canvas bag, agents found a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. It was the same make of weapon that the bank bandits used. Evidence inside the duplex confirmed the bandits were more than a gang of thieves. The house contained an armory big enough to equip a small cadre of terrorists. Agents found ski masks, FBI hats, police uniforms, and false IDs from nearly every state of the Union. Books and literature detailed the gang's creed of militant hate.
I'm Commander Pedro.
Investigators discovered a tape among the propaganda. It targeted young white males for recruitment into the Aryan Republican Army.
Today, we're preparing to take over the USA. Tomorrow, the world.
Please have a seat.
A Columbus bank teller had briefly glimpsed the face of one of the bandits 17 months earlier.
See anybody that you recognize, please.
Detectives gave her a photo lineup, hoping she could remember enough to make an ID.
This gentleman here.
Despite the intervening months, she picked out Langan from the array of similar-looking men.
Bank and robbing, I mean,
While Langan refused to cooperate, Guthrie agreed to tell all he knew.
I don't know.
Agents debriefed him 10 hours a day for 10 straight days.
How many accomplices did you have?
He could recall all the places, times, and dates. It took 99 pages to detail the 22 robberies. But when it came to his at-large accomplices, Guthrie only knew their first names. The bank bandits had been assembled like an underground terrorist cell. Personal information on others was kept to a minimum to prevent capture. Guthrie could only offer that the man he knew only as Scott was involved in music. The man he knew as Kevin was the nephew of a police officer.
This is Supervisor Special Agent.
Both lived in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah.
The scant information was forwarded to Pennsylvania. Special Agent Joe Hendrickson of the Philadelphia FBI field office was initially overwhelmed by the request.
There was no hope of finding these people with that information. I sat back and had a cup of coffee, and then I said, well, I'll go contact the Philadelphia Police Department. And there's a possibility that maybe their personnel records indicate nephews, but I was in much doubt that that type of record existed, because I know that in my outfit, I did not list nieces and nephews in my personnel file.
Philadelphia had 7,000 police officers, any one of which could be Kevin's uncle. The search began at the intelligence division of the police department. An officer knew immediately who the FBI was looking for. The division had been keeping tabs on white supremacists in the area. Intelligence officers had kept them under surveillance for over a year. Officers often spotted them meeting on a farm belonging to Mark Thomas.
Over the years, the Philadelphia Police Department had been taking down tags at various rallies and so forth. And at some point in time, they took down a tag, ran the tag, and it came out to Kevin McCarthy. And then they said, you know, we've got a lieutenant here that has that name. They contacted him, and lo and behold, they found out that Kevin McCarthy was attending Aryan Nation rallies.
Hendrickson put a surveillance squad on Kevin McCarthy. They observed him repeatedly visiting a recording studio in Philadelphia. Agents noted the license numbers of the cars outside the business. They ran the plates for all the people going in and out. One of the vehicles belonged to a man named Scott Stediford. He managed the studio and also played drums in McCarthy's band. From his amateur photo, Guthrie confirmed that this was the Scott he had worked with. Using that same photo, a witness also recognized Stediford as the getaway driver in the Des Moines robbery. An arrest warrant was sent to Philadelphia. The studio presented too many risks for officers to invade and force. Agents could not be sure who was inside and what weapons might be hidden. They didn't want another shootout.
I'm writing it for my mom, actually, and these are the lyrics I came up with. And
Two undercover agents posed as father and daughter. The female agent asked Stediford about the cost of studio time. She claimed she wanted to record a song for her mother.
Can you grab your guitar?
As Stediford considered a quote, the undercover agents confirmed that he was alone and unarmed.
Okay, turn around. Up. You're under arrest. Turn around. Hands behind
The agents drew on him. They placed him under arrest.
Nothing to do with that.
The FBI did not have an arrest warrant for Kevin McCarthy. They feared that he would run once he heard about Stediford's capture.
What we ended up doing was we brought his uncle, the Philadelphia police officer, with us. We felt that with his blood relative, the law enforcement presence, and the total set of circumstances, that we hoped that he would somehow be convinced that the thing to do would be to cooperate.
The uncle entered the basement bedroom. He disarmed his sleeping nephew. The agent woke the young man.
Kevin? Special Agent Henderson, FBI. Son?
He began explaining that it was in McCarthy's best interest to cooperate with the FBI.
Yes, okay. We kind of know what went on today. We know who
Only
was
suspicion
with.
tied the young man to the
If you do
crimes.
that, things are going to go a lot easier on you, all right?
The agent needed a confession.
You have something you want to give us?
He showed McCarthy the 99-page admission made by Guthrie.
And when he saw this report describing every bank robbery, what they did, where they went, he realized that we had all the information. He just didn't realize that we had no evidence.
The young man was overwhelmed. He voluntarily turned over the weapon and clothing he used in the robberies. When he began to confess, his uncle stopped him and advised him to get a lawyer. With all the suspects now in custody, agents considered their investigation wrapped up. On July 3rd, 1996, Richard Guthrie pleaded guilty to 19 bank robberies. He agreed to testify against his accomplices. With his cooperation, prosecutors considered their case airtight. Nine days later, the cooperating witness hanged himself in a jail cell. The suicide devastated the government's case.
Now, that created a major problem for the prosecution because since Guthrie could no longer be cross-examined, his information couldn't be used directly against Langan.
If the other bank bandits were going to be convicted, the FBI had to find someone else who could corroborate Guthrie's confession. In 1996, the legal case against the Midwestern bank bandits was on the verge of collapse. The chief cooperating witness had killed himself. Without his testimony, the evidence against his captured co-defendants was slim. Special Agent Joe Hendrickson spearheaded the investigation in Philadelphia.
These bank robbers were very, very good, and the evidence that they left behind at every robbery was zero. They were fully masked, fully gloved. Their weapons were untraceable.
Hendrickson helped convince Kevin McCarthy to plead guilty and turn state's witness. But prosecutors needed more than one cooperating felon to convict the others. Investigators focused on the man who had steered suspects into the Aryan Republican Army. Mark Thomas had turned Scott Stediford and Kevin McCarthy into outlaws. Thomas edited a newsletter and webpage for white supremacists. His literature and videos had swayed many young men into racist and anti-government organizations.
And we felt that even though he was not personally involved in these crimes, that he had caused these crimes to come about, and therefore he was responsible. And based on conspiracy laws, we felt that it was quite possible to go after him for conspiring to commit bank robbery.
The FBI made weekly contact with Thomas at his Pennsylvania farm.
I want to ask you some questions.
They wanted to know about his activities, but more importantly, they wanted to keep pressure on him.
15 years. 15 years. You live here alone? You know, I've had about enough of you guys coming over here and messing with me.
They made it clear that they suspected him and weren't going away.
Cool.
Kevin McCarthy told investigators that he and Scott Stediford had stayed at Thomas's home.
This stuff is going to change your life. Yeah.
He acted like a father figure to them and warned them of the coming race war. He brought the young men to live in Elohim City, a white separatist compound in Oklahoma. During the summer of 1994, Thomas invited them to join the Aryan Republican Army. In mid-October, Scott Stediford agreed. He participated in his first bank robbery 2 weeks later. On November 13th, Thomas drove Kevin McCarthy to Arkansas for an introduction to Langan and Guthrie. The teenager heard them boast of successfully robbing banks throughout the Midwest. The 17-year-old joined up.
We found a better way to do it.
Agents also learned from McCarthy that Thomas took $100 in stolen money for the start of an Aryan war chest. Over the months of contact, agents caught Thomas in several lies about his activities.
This is my farm, and I don't need you on my farm, you know? So,
They took what they had to U.S. prosecutors.
okay, I'm doing what he says.
The United States Attorney's Office decided that based on the cooperating witnesses' testimony, we were going to arrest him. Even though it was a very slim case, it was a close call, as the United States Attorney's Office would say, but we're going to put out an arrest warrant for him.
Thomas heard that the FBI was going to pick him up on a charge of conspiracy. He agreed to surrender after calling the media to witness the event. He told the press their presence prevented his assassination. Thomas pleaded not guilty at his arraignment hearing on February 4th, 1997.
No comment.
He asked to meet with the FBI the next day. That's where Mark Thomas caved. He signed a 7-page plea agreement that corroborated Kevin McCarthy's confession. The government's case was now solid.
This was the biggest surprise of anyone's involved in the case. The idea that the head of the movement, after one day in prison, would decide to completely cooperate was just unfathomable. But apparently our pressure over the 6 months of continually talking to him, and then the one night in prison, was enough for him to decide that he had been completely wrong in his ideals and that he wanted to, as he said, get right with God.
Mark Thomas was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. Peter Langan was convicted on bank robbery and gun charges. He received life without parole. Kevin McCarthy got 5 years. His testimony helped convict Scott Stediford on 2 counts of armed bank robbery. The court sentenced Stediford to 29.5 years. In America, extremist groups enjoy the freedom to maintain their beliefs. They are constitutionally protected until they cross the legal line. If they engage in outlaw activities, they will find the FBI on a mission to stop them. An hour north of New York City, a band of deadly gunmen descended on a peaceful suburban community. They struck quickly and savagely. Agents learned that the gang's leader had been living underground for more than 2 decades. The FBI's New York Anti-Terrorist Task Force hoped they could find this most wanted fugitive before he killed again.
A series of armored car heists and bloody shootouts shocked law enforcement. The brutal violence of the crimes suggested a motive more complex than greed. When the robbers started targeting police, the FBI took charge. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents would expend thousands of man-hours to stop an armed gang that terrorized New York.
Rockland County, New York, 1981. The burgeoning suburb just 20 miles north of New York City had become a refuge of former city dwellers. Most left their urban homes in pursuit of safer, more affordable neighborhoods for their families. They enjoyed more open space and lower crime rates. The town of Nanuet was typical and drew many people to its new mall. At 3:40, October 20th, 1981, a Brink's armored truck made its regularly scheduled pickup from a retailer. One guard remained in the truck while another watched the doors. The third returned with cash and receipts. With no warning, a gang of masked men burst out of a red van. One guard was hit in the throat, another was hit in the arm. The gunman then trained their weapons on the driver. He shot back, but the assailant's gunfire was overwhelming. One guard managed to climb into the back of the truck for protection.
All right, Charlie, let's go.
Police Chief Alan Colsey of the South Nyack Grandview Police Department was 5 miles away when he received the call. Officers from other nearby towns were also called, since Nanuet was too small to support its own police force.
In October of 1981, when the Brinks case occurred, it was an extremely shocking event for the entire area of Rockland County. For the Nyack community, for the Clarkstown community, this was something that they had never expected to ever see.
Clarkstown police and paramedics arrived first. They placed one guard on life support, hoping he would survive the ride to the hospital. Brink's guard Peter Page would never get that chance. A gunshot had severed major arteries in his right shoulder and neck. He died before help arrived. The uninjured driver said though the gunman had worn masks, he believed they were black males. They sped off in a red van. From a deposit log, police learned that $1.6 million was missing. $1.3 million remained in the truck. Chief Colsey received updates as he raced to the crime scene.
The first information coming in from the Nanuet scene was that the suspects had been seen escaping in a red van. They were eastbound on Route 59. This would take them along a route adjacent to the New York State Thruway, which leads directly into New York City over the Tappan Zee Bridge.
Moments later, a local resident close to the mall reported seeing masked gunmen in a parking lot, transferring sacks and weapons into a small moving truck. The witness told Clarkstown police that the vehicles exited eastbound. Detective Arthur Keenan and 2 other police cruisers were on Route 59, close to the Thruway entrance when they received the update.
We proceeded on to Route 59 near the New York State Thruway to see if we would see the getaway vehicle. We went to that area figuring that would be a getaway route.
When the officers arrived at the intersection of Mountain View Road and Interstate 87, they noticed a moving truck waiting to turn left onto the Thruway. Keenan ordered one patrol unit to block the on-ramp. Then, Detective Keenan received a call about a second moving truck.
At that time, there was a radio transmission from the Orangetown police that they had a U-Haul truck heading southbound on Route 304 near the New Jersey line, which was approximately the same distance from the Nanuet Mall as we were.
Unsure if the truck on Route 59 was the suspects, Sergeant Edward O'Grady and Detective Keenan blocked the truck. Officers Brian Lennon and Waverly Chip Brown approached the drivers.
The suspects were described as being black males. At the intersection, we observed the driver and passenger as being white individuals.
Yeah.
The woman objected to the shotgun. Sergeant O'Grady directed Lennon to return the gun to the patrol car. They believed they had stopped the wrong truck.
On the boulevard westbound.
As Lennon secured the gun, the detective inspected the back of the moving truck. Though it didn't appear locked, the back door wouldn't open. He told the couple that he wanted to see what was inside.
I couldn't understand why it wouldn't open. I wanted to know what was in the back of the truck. And then instantly, as I was said that, a noise came from the truck. I turned and all the suspects were coming out of the back shooting.
The rounds from the officer's 6-shot revolvers bounced off the bulletproof vests worn by the armed gang. Officer Lennon rushed back to his patrol car for his shotgun. Officer Brown was shot in the neck and shoulder and fell to the ground. Even if the officers were wearing their vests, it wouldn't have helped.
We were at a disadvantage. In addition to which, the ammunition that was being used in the M16 was capable of going through vests.
As the masked gunman approached, one executed Officer Brown at point-blank range. Detective Keenan was hit in the leg and ran for cover.
I was still being fired at even after I took cover. I had shots go between my legs. The tree that I was behind took a shot chest high.
Officer Lennon had unlocked his shotgun but was taking heavy fire. The gunman rammed the police car, trying to clear it for their escape. It didn't work. Then, 2 cars arrived at the scene. The suspects gathered the money bags and piled into the cars. One suspect never made it to a getaway car. A passing motorist grabbed the woman who had been a passenger in the truck and prevented her escape. He watched the white Oldsmobile and tan Honda speed away. Officers Keenan and Lennon rushed to help their injured colleagues.
As the suspects made their getaway, I went to both Waverly Brown and Eddie O'Grady to see if there was anything I could do for them. Waverly Brown and Eddie were both beyond any medical attention that I could administer.
Still en route, Chief Alan Colsey's main focus now was to find the fleeing vehicles, but reports were scattered and hard to decipher.
It was very, very difficult at this particular time to get a clear, open communication from anyone out in the field back to a desk area because of the number of communications that were literally stepping on one another.
As the chief approached the area, he determined that the crime scene didn't need any more personnel or vehicles. He set out to find those responsible.
I didn't want to interfere with the emergency response in that area. The road was completely blocked. So knowing that this particular escape route would lead them in a particular direction, I made a U-turn at Mountain View and 59 and traced my steps back.
He figured the suspects would travel towards New York City, where there was potential for a greater loss of life. He believed their route would take them along Mountain View Avenue to a T intersection.
I figured there was a 50-50 shot that they were either going to go east or west, and that I could cover at least one of those avenues of escape, and went immediately to that area as quickly as I could. In fact, en route to that particular intersection, I observed the suspect vehicles, 2 of them, at a high rate of speed heading east on Christian Herald Road.
The chief followed the cars. He radioed in his position and asked for backup.
It was clear to me, based upon the events that had transpired up until that point, that these were extremely dangerous individuals who had no compulsion or no regard for human life and no hesitancy to take the utmost of violent actions against anybody who would stand in their way.
Until units arrived, it would be up to him to stop 2 vehicles that held 6 heavily armed cop killers. After following for a few minutes, the chief noticed that 2 passengers in the Honda had ducked out of sight, perhaps to load guns.
As we get to the corner of 6th and Broadway, the Oldsmobile makes a right-hand turn onto Broadway going south into the middle of town, and the tan Honda attempts to do the same, but slides, skids across the road.
The chief positioned his car between himself and the fugitives. He drew his gun and continued to call for backup, hoping his voice could be heard over the clamor of simultaneous calls.
I continually order the suspects out of the vehicle. There's a period of a few seconds where nothing in fact happens. And then the door opens up and I see a female put her feet out onto the roadway and remain seated in the front seat of the car.
The chief repeated his commands to exit the vehicle with their hands in the air. The woman then began to reach behind the seat, perhaps for a gun. Then a second occupant walked towards the officer wearing a bulletproof vest.
Despite my repeated orders to the contrary, one of the suspects came walking up towards me. The female was attempting to reach around and get something which I immediately assumed to be a weapon.
The chief was outnumbered, and neither of the suspects obeyed his orders. He made one more desperate call for backup.
Driver! Driver!
On October 20th, 1981, the Nyack, New York police chief had stopped one of 2 getaway cars filled with suspects from an armored car robbery that had left 3 dead and 2 wounded. As he continued to call for backup, one suspect reached behind her seat. Another approached the chief wearing a bulletproof vest. He was outnumbered, and neither of the suspects obeyed his orders. As the chief made one last desperate radio call, backup arrived.
Got 2, got 1 in the back seat. Get on the ground, face down, on the ground, get on the ground, face down.
They secured the scene and pulled a 3rd suspect from the back seat. Police believed that he had been an armed lookout for the other 2, but was injured and dropped his weapon when their getaway car careened out of control. Police searched the car. In the trunk, they recovered sacks that held in excess of $1 million. Under the front seat, they found a loaded 9mm pistol, the weapon the woman had likely been reaching for. Thousands attended the funeral for the officers slain at the October 20th shootout. The entire community shared the grief felt by Detective Arthur Keenan at the loss of his colleagues.
The death of my 2 friends, Chipper Brown and Eddie O'Grady, definitely affected my life from that point forward. When you're in a small community like that, in a small police department like that, you go to each other's weddings and christenings and barbecues and things of that nature, and it becomes like a secondary family of sorts, and so it was very devastating to lose two of your good friends.
The 4 murder suspects, including the woman captured at the roadblock, maintained their silence while arraigned at Nyack Village Hall. Police had no way to know how many more were still at large.
The law enforcement community in Rockland County was taken greatly by surprise by the sequence and magnitude of the events. This was really a small assault team that came to Rockland County to rob this Brink's truck, and it was a magnitude and a seriousness and a firepower that had never been seen anywhere in the law enforcement community here.
If Nyack police were not used to such violence, 30 miles south in New York City, The FBI and New York City police certainly were. The New York Joint Terrorism Task Force had already been investigating a series of armored car heists throughout the region that had been executed in a similar fashion. Now retired Special Agent Lou Vesey was a member of that team. He believed the Nyack robbery was connected to the others.
The people who had done Nyack had to have some involvement with all these other crimes. I mean, because the MO was absolutely identical. The whites were driving the vehicles, the blacks had done the robberies, the weapons that were used were identical to the weapons that had been used in the other robberies we were looking at. So there was no doubt in anybody's mind that this was at least some of the same group.
The suspects were processed at the Rockland County Jail. When asked for their names, all gave aliases, except one. Judy Clark, arrested in the getaway car, was no stranger to the FBI. To agents, she was known as a member of the Weather Underground, a radical group involved in many violent robberies and bombings in the 1960s and 70s. For the Brink's robbery, she would be sentenced to 75 years in prison. Special Agent Lou Vesey was an expert on the Weather Underground.
One female I recognized immediately as Judy Clark, who had been someone who had been under investigation previously by us as a possible terrorist. There was another female there who I thought looked very familiar.
Agent Vesey suspected the woman arrested at the roadblock was Kathy Boudin, another member of the Weather Underground. A fingerprint check confirmed it. Boudin pled guilty and was sentenced to 20 years in prison for acting as a decoy passenger in the moving truck. They discovered one of the men to be David Gilbert, Boudin's common-law husband, who was also a member of the Weather Underground. He received 75 years for his role. Sam Brown, who had been injured in the getaway car, was an associate of the Black Liberation Army, another militant group. Like Gilbert and Clark, Brown was sentenced to 75 years in prison. 4 members of the gang were behind bars. From survivors' statements, agents estimated at least 7 more were out on the streets. Special Agent Ken Maxwell joined the investigation to help determine who and where the remaining fugitives might be. One new lead held promise. The second getaway car had been found a few miles away.
The Oldsmobile was found in Westchester County, dumped or abandoned. Inside, there was a great deal of blood, indicating that whoever had abandoned the vehicle had been wounded during the shootout.
Agents checked local hospitals for gunshot victims. They found no patients whose whereabouts were unaccounted for on the day of the shootout.
Other cases, the bombing cases, even after.
The Oldsmobile was registered to a woman at an apartment on Prospect Street in East Orange, New Jersey. They suspected that the armed fugitives had taken refuge there. Agents obtained a search warrant. They found no one inside and began to process the apartment.
The location in East Orange, New Jersey was a treasure trove of evidence. It's what we commonly refer to as a safe house. Inside that safe house, the New Jersey State Police and the FBI located a tremendous amount of documentary evidence indicating other safe houses, other vehicles used by these subjects, and also photographs and other forms of identification that began to unravel the mystery as to who was involved.
One key name investigators discovered on rent receipts was the legal name of the tenant, Marilyn Jean Buck. The FBI knew her name and history. She was a known operative of the Black Liberation Army and its only white member.
Well, Marilyn Buck had a long history of her involvement with radical politics, if you will. At the time of the robbery, she was a fugitive who had gone underground and was wanted on weapons charges.
What is that?
Agents also found a bomb-making manual, diagrams of 6 police precincts, and a hit list naming civic and business leaders. They turned up more false IDs, disguises, a shotgun, 2 9mm pistols, and ammunition. A ledger with detailed notes made in Marilyn Buck's handwriting revealed the group's illicit activities. It listed dates and expenditures for rental cars, guns, ammunition, and illegal drugs. As investigators sifted through the evidence, they began to encounter a problem that would plague them throughout this complex case, according to Agent Lou Vesey.
I think the real difficulty is just the sheer bulk of information and evidence. Numerous pieces of evidence from numerous crime scenes, individuals who constantly used aliases, false identification, had safe houses. You had to figure out who was who. Was that person identical to a person with a different name, but a same physical description in another safe house? It was a gigantic jigsaw puzzle, and sometimes you didn't think you had all the pieces.
Agents still didn't know who was involved, where they were, and why they did it.
Mr. Brown,
to get answers, the FBI needed to develop a cooperating witness. They turned to Sam Brown in Otisville Prison, the gunman arrested after the car chase. He was a low-level associate of the Black Liberation Army. Brown cooperated in the hopes that his sentence would be lightened.
Sam Brown was the only one who decided to talk to the investigators. He really got us started. He's the one that named a few names, and with those few names, that's where the investigation began widening out to the rest of them. So he was very important.
The most valuable name Brown provided was that of the mastermind behind the armed robbery, Mutulu Shakur. Shakur was a known militant, the leader of the Black Liberation Army, and one of the highest-ranking members of the gang who called themselves the Family.
In case you get stopped.
The Family was a group of about a dozen terrorists, comprised primarily of members of the Weather Underground and Black Liberation Army. Their formal association was news to Agent Maxwell.
We had known from prior investigations in the past that these groups had communicated, that they had some common goals and objectives, but never before had that communication or association evolved into this type of criminal activity.
All right, well listen, Sam.
Brown told agents that the Family met on many occasions to plan the Nyack robbery. Mutulu Shakur assigned jobs to each member of the group.
You know what to do with that? Yes, sir.
Edward Joseph and Donald Weems were assigned as gunmen in the armored car assault. The FBI knew Weems was a member of the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army. He had escaped from prison in 1978. Investigators knew little about Joseph. Another man named Chewy Ferguson would handle the M16 assault rifle. Samuel Lee Smith would be armed with a shotgun.
I don't want anybody to fire these weapons till Chewy says. Chewy's a weapon man, all right?
Brown didn't know the names of the others, but provided agents with physical descriptions. Agents put out APBs for the 5 names given, which included Samuel Lee Smith. In Queens, homicide detectives were on their way to Smith's last known address. A license plate registered to him had been found in a safe house. As one detective drove down Smith Street, he passed a driver who fit the suspect's description. The detective called for a marked unit to stop him. When the man saw the lights, he took off. Police followed him into an alley.
Get out of the car! Put your hands out the window! Use your left hand to open the door. Step out of the vehicle. Step out of the car. You step out of the car. Get out of the car. Step out of the car. Keep your hands back.
For the third time in as many days, an armed member of the family had opened fire on uniformed officers. Samuel Lee Smith, a fugitive wanted for his role in the shooting deaths of 2 police officers and an armored car guard, had opened fire on New York City police. His attack did not last long. He was killed by the officers returning fire. Smith was the 5th member of a terrorist group called the Family to have been taken off the streets. 7 others remained at large, with almost $1 million in stolen cash still missing. On a tip from Sam Brown, a gang member already in custody, police canvassed a Bronx neighborhood for another suspect named Donald Weems. Special Agent Ken Maxwell recalls that Brown knew very little about Weems.
Brown had given us a general description of a neighborhood in the Bronx where he had met this individual who fit the description of Weems. My partner and I, after a process of elimination and a lot of legwork, pinpointed a building that possibly could be the place Brown was talking about.
Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, hoping someone would know Weems and reveal his address. They got lucky. A neighbor directed police to his apartment. He told them Weems was upstairs right now. Detectives called for backup. Since every other encounter with these terrorists had resulted in gunfire, they prepared for the worst. In a short time, they entered the building with a warrant and a SWAT team. They had no idea if Weems was alone or if he was armed.
There were some anxious moments in terms of waiting, but then he ultimately came out and surrendered in the hallway. In his apartment, however, we found several firearms, a gas mask, a bulletproof vest, and enough ammunition to do battle with a small army.
Weems was the only member of the family inside. He was tried on federal charges and found guilty of robbery and second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison. Though 6 members of the family were now in custody, group leader Mutulu Shakur remained on the streets. Once again, cooperating informant Sam Brown provided agents with a lead. He believed Mutulu Shakur could most likely be found in Harlem at the acupuncture clinic Shakur had founded. The FBI and NYPD set up 24-hour surveillance on the clinic.
We utilized agents and detectives of diverse ethnic backgrounds to do our best to blend into certain neighborhoods. We knew from both experience and also recognizing the intelligence and versatility of this group that we had to be particularly discreet in surveilling these individuals.
Agents watched and listened for months. Though Shakur never showed, they noted several others who came and went quite often. Agents hoped they would eventually lead them to Shakur. One night, agents followed a man from the clinic to a house at 85 Barrow Street in Greenwich Village. They learned the house was rented to Edward Joseph, one of the suspects named by informant Sam Brown in the Nyack robbery and shootout. They suspected Shakur was hiding there. They were right. Their months of perseverance had paid off. A federal judge authorized a Title III. This permitted agents to set up wiretaps and bugs. Shakur and Joseph must have suspected the FBI's presence, since they often turned up the TV when they talked. Despite this, agents were able to pick up snippets of incriminating conversations, including a discussion of killing informant Sam Brown. After several weeks, agents had enough evidence for a warrant to raid the Greenwich Village hideout. On the night of March 25, 1982, 6 months since the murders and robbery in Nyack, agents prepared for the assault. They'd strike early the next morning, hoping to catch the fugitives asleep and unaware. As the agents watched and waited, they saw Shakur enter the house. At dawn, 2 SWAT teams arrived. One team entered through the front door. The other covered the fire escape and back. They arrested 2 men, Chewy Ferguson and Edward Joseph, both named as participants in the Nyack heist. Their leader, Mutulu Shakur, was nowhere to be found. Somehow, he'd escaped during the night, slipping past the surveillance. Ferguson and Joseph were convicted on federal charges as accessories for harboring a fugitive, though they were acquitted of murder charges stemming from the Nyack shootings. Both were sentenced to 12 years in prison. On July 23, 1982, almost a year after 2 officers and a guard had been killed in the Brink's robbery, Mutulu Shakur was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Finding the leader of the gang responsible for 3 cold-blooded murders would now become a priority for every FBI office across the country. Almost a year after a Brink's robbery and shootout with police, FBI agents around the country continued to pursue the mastermind behind the $1 million heist. Mutulu Shakur, a leader of the terrorist group called The Family, had been placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Shakur and at least 3 others remained at large. In the summer of 1982, an agent from New York City traveled to Georgia to interview a member of The Family who had been arrested for a separate bank robbery. Tyrone Risen offered his cooperation in the hopes of a lighter sentence by the state of Georgia. Though he claimed that he was not present when the armored car was robbed in Nyack, New York, he confessed to having helped plan the job that left a Brink's guard and 2 police officers dead. Risen provided crucial information about other members of The Family.
Risen was not only a member of the family, he was a very important member of the family and had been involved in all the robberies. He knew who was in the family, he knew the names, and he knew how the family operated. So he was able to describe the MO, the robberies they did, the weapons they used, who did what.
Our lookouts, more or less.
Risen told the agent how members of the group were able to secure so many aliases. The prisoner explained that a manager of a children's clothing store in Manhattan was key to obtaining false IDs. The manager gathered license information each time a customer paid by check. Since New York State did not require a photo license in the early 80s, an imposter would take the information to the Motor Vehicles Department, claiming she'd lost her license. Then, the DMV would issue a duplicate immediately. Risen also described to Special Agent Maxwell the group's motives.
They term these robberies expropriations, almost acts of war. And as one of their members eloquently, or not so eloquently, commented one time, in war, people get hurt. So if you can understand that philosophy, you can understand the mindset or the motivation behind the gang.
Risen's information helped agents understand more about the inner workings of the group. But by the fall of 1984, 3 years after the Brink's heist and triple murder, 3 fugitives still eluded the FBI, including gang leader Mutulu Shakur, Marilyn Buck, and Susan Rosenberg. Despite this, time was on the side of the FBI. The longer the fugitives ran, the more likely it was they'd make a mistake. On November 29, 1984, local police received a call from a manager at a storage facility in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He reported a customer on the premises who had been paying her bill with a credit card that was determined to be stolen.
Hello, this is Bob from Cherry Hill Storage.
Officers arrived to find the woman about to leave. Inside the back of the van, they noticed containers that appeared to hold explosives. Police asked her for ID. When she reached for her purse under the driver's seat, the cautious officers stopped her. They wanted her hands to stay in plain sight. Inside her purse, they found a weapon. They placed her under arrest. When she was processed, police learned that she was Susan Rosenberg, a member of the family, wanted in connection with the Brink's robbery and shootout. Investigators secured a search warrant for the van. Inside the crates, they found 640 pounds of explosives and 14 weapons. The van was registered in New York State to a woman named Louise Harmon. Agents discovered the name and her address had been falsified. As forensic technicians processed Rosenberg's vehicle, they noticed a sticker on the door from a repair shop in Connecticut. Agents located the New Haven repair shop where the vehicle had been serviced. They hoped the owner would remember the persons who had brought the van in. They showed the owner several photographs of women who were known associates of the family. The woman he identified was Marilyn Jean Buck, one of 2 remaining fugitives in the Brink's robbery and shootout. While Buck had not used her real name on the vehicle's paperwork, she listed an address in Dobbs Ferry, New York on the repair bill. Agents followed up on the lead. They determined that Buck was in Dobbs Ferry and set up surveillance, but she eluded them for months. Then on May 11, 1985, they finally cornered her outside a diner and arrested her. Buck denied knowing Mutulu Shakur or having any connection to the Brink's robbery and shootout 4 years before.
Have a weapon up against the car.
But a federal trial would prove differently. Buck was sentenced to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
She was extremely important in the planning of the robberies and in the procurement of the weapons, as it turns out. A lot of the weapons that the family had, she obtained in gun shows in Texas, buying them under phony names.
Now, only one known suspect in the Nyack robbery and shootout remained: terrorist leader Mutulu Shakur.
Do you happen to see anybody with him?
Agents searched a Baltimore apartment rented by Buck, hoping for a lead to Shakur's whereabouts. They discovered paraphernalia for making false identity papers, wigs likely used in disguises, plans to bomb federal offices, and $10,000 in cash. Searchers also found guns and ammunition stashed in various locations throughout the apartment.
Looks like another handgun.
Then, scrawled on a piece of paper, agents came across what they'd been hoping for: evidence of Mutulu Shakur's whereabouts. It listed a phone number in Los Angeles. Special Agent David Mitchell spearheaded the search for Shakur. He contacted the FBI Los Angeles field office to have agents follow up the lead.
Special Agent Dana Ingalls in the Los Angeles office advised me that he had interviewed an individual that had established that Shakur had in fact been residing in Los Angeles.
Shakur had eluded authorities in a nationwide manhunt for over 5 years. Agents hoped that this time they could corner him and bring down the leader of the terrorist gang responsible for killing 1 armored car guard and 2 police officers. The FBI and NYPD were closing in on Mutulu Shakur, the elusive criminal believed to have masterminded a deadly Brink's robbery and shootout. Special Agent David Mitchell had tracked Shakur to LA, where the terrorist leader remained 1 step ahead.
There were a number of challenges. Shakur was working with a group of individuals that were closely aligned to each other. They had a support network. The investigators all assigned to this investigation were having a difficult time getting individuals to cooperate.
After many weeks, investigators were finally able to convince an informant to tell what he knew about the fugitive's whereabouts. He said he didn't know where Shakur was hiding, but he identified a man by the name of Chapman, known to be close to Shakur. For about 6 weeks, agents conducted ground and air surveillance on Chapman and other Shakur associates, but Shakur continued to elude authorities.
Shakur was leading a very low-profile life in Los Angeles, at least as far as our investigation could determine. He did not frequent any locations or areas where he could be identified, and we virtually knew very little about his activity at that time.
As the surveillance continued, Mitchell and the other investigators tried to find a pattern to the moves Shakur's associates made to hide him around the city. They pored over apartment rental records and other documents, but learned little. Then on February 11th, 1986, their confidential informant called.
Hey, thanks for the tip.
He told them that Chapman would meet with Shakur that night after Chapman left a Lakers basketball game. Investigators located his car and waited for him to leave the forum. Chapman attempted what agents call dry cleaning, counter-surveillance tactics designed to lose a tail. He wove through the streets, turning and changing direction. Police stayed with him, not knowing if Chapman had seen them. When Chapman reached his destination, Mitchell's team pulled in nearby. Chapman approached a man they believed was Shakur. Two officers headed to where the men were talking, careful not to attract attention. When Shakur saw them, he took off on foot. They caught up with him in an alley. The arrest of this violent revolutionary closed a 5-year nationwide manhunt.
When Shakur was arrested, It was apparent to those officers and agents involved in the arrest that he was tired, and it was late in the evening. He was transported to the Los Angeles FBI office where Agent Ingalls and I attempted to interview him. Shakur declined to furnish any statement to us during this interview and was subsequently removed back to New York City to face the charges.
In the spring of 1986, Shakur was tried on federal charges related to the Brink's robbery and shootout. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The police officers who survived that terrifying day in Nyack, New York, were relieved that Shakur had been brought to justice. But for South Nyack Police Chief Alan Colsey, the memory of their loss would always be with them.
Eddie O'Grady and Officer Brown, Chip Brown as we called him, we're local Nyack community members. They'd gone through the Nyack school district. They had been on the job before I was, and in fact, more or less had sort of brought me and broken me into the community. They were very, very close to the community and to a lot of us that were police officers here. They were excellent people. They were excellent cops, and we miss them dearly to this day.
To commemorate the slain officers, a monument was erected in Nyack, New York. The surviving colleagues have found some comfort in knowing that the lessons learned from the Nyack shootout have made life safer for citizens, as well as for the officers on the street today.
Let it not be said that they died in vain, but rather that their ultimate sacrifice led to the identification of a national problem. I think their ultimate sacrifice and the tragic deaths of everyone involved certainly uncovered a nationwide network of domestic terrorists heretofore unknown, and in essence prevented the loss of life to others.